is intended for mature, open-minded audiences only. If you are easily offended, we suggest you turn this wacky shit straight off. Oh man, we had so many cougar sightings last time. I don't know if it's going to be that bad this time. We're going to stoke the fire a little bit higher tonight. But yeah, why not have a twofer campfire?
That comment from was making his boyfriend listen to the podcast and said that his boyfriend said, Ron sounds like a cowboy.
I did see that. I was about to go comment on it, but then I posted something on the Facebook page. I was asking questions about our guest tonight, or for our guest tonight, Rob The Undertaker. Very excited to have him back on the program. And I figured if I went and commented right now, it would fuck up the algorithm, and it would hide that other post. You got to be careful about these things. But I did appreciate that. A cowboy, of all things. What do you guys think about that?
You know,
sound like a cowboy?
Sometimes you seem to dress up like a cowboy, like an old-fashioned cowboy, with your slickly wares.
Well, interesting. Here's the thing. I do have some like full-on cowboy western shirts that I occasionally rock.
Yeah, that's the ones I'm talking about.
So I have that look, but I also mostly wear vests and ties and, gay Irishman hats. So that's not the cowboy look. But I don't think I've ever been given that. I take it as a compliment. I mean, clearly he said I have a nice voice and I sound like a cowboy.
Get out, y'all.
Where have all the cowboys gone? Right here, Paula. Wait, is that her name? What was that girl's name?
Paula Cole?
Paula, is it Paula Cole?
Well, now I think it is.
I think Cole sounds right, but Paula doesn't sound right. That's the first name I pulled out of my head. Where have all the cowboys gone? I may be singing that wrong. I can't really remember the memory. I can't remember the memory. See, this is the kind of shit I'm talking about.
The memory.
We had a good run.
Yeah, that sounds like a Meatloaf song right there. I can't remember the memories.
That's a great Meatloaf lyric. Chris can barely hear you, but I think you're in transition maybe here. John Mark is not available, so I will only reiterate that it is All Hallows Eve, the most spooky time of year. I did get some feedback on last week's show, personal feedback, that the animal noises and creature noises out in the forest are... I don't think people were distracted or bothered, but they were definitely spooked, and that's the whole fucking point. Like, well,
even I heard something listening back here when we recorded that startled me.
Yeah, what was that?
It sounded like a dying child. I don't know. It was like.
There were things. There were things out there that once you put the headphones on, the microphones pick things up. We can really just hear the crackling fire. So I think the microphone picks up things off in the distance. And I know there was like a spooky child that popped up every now and again, some cougars.
We call that, what is it, EVPs. That's right.
Yeah, that's right.
Hey, real quick, does my oxygen bother you?
No, and it's certainly not. I can't hear it, but it's certainly not going to bother anybody over the crackling fire.
Well, it's at my nose, and like if I'm like, I don't know if you could hear that or not.
I can't hear anything.
I could hear it.
Yeah, but it's unfortunate that the campfire smoke is blowing all right to you.
I know. And it could be explosive. Very explosive by the end of the night.
Yeah, just wheel on over there, would you?
Let's be real.
Anywho, we do have Rob The Undertaker joining us in a little while. I have a trunk of Ron's mystical wonders and creepy factoids and spooky stories. These are going to be like little tidbits that I'll drop for you all. Once we open that, I know you guys got a couple of spooky things or some spooky things that you want to talk about. It's going to be a little free form beyond that. And once we get Rob on, we've got some good questions to ask him, and he is excited. I can't remember if he did this last time. He's excited to stick around for weird trivia. He even requested it.
I can't remember if he did or didn't, but he loves the show. And he's got his own podcast, too, right now going on.
Yeah, we'll have to remember. So, if I forget, help me.
I will.
I'm usually pretty good at letting people plug their shit, but...
For sure.
Yeah, and that's all. It's kind of like... I listened to it because Michael Warfield was on his podcast.
Isn't that crazy?
It was this sort of nice cyclical thing happening. They talked about us on their show. And it seems like it's very industry specific, but it was interesting. It was a nice nice conversation.
Yeah. My favorite story he had was about because he's Undertaker. He was junior. I don't know what you'd call it, like a embalmer or no, like
an apprentice or something.
Yeah, apprentice to Kurt Cobain's autopsy.
Yeah.
We talked about that last time.
Talk about that.
Be curious.
What a fucking trip. I mean, this whole industry is a trip, but it's super interesting that, like, what a weird feeling to just be in a room with maybe one or two other people or completely alone and working on someone knowing, like, God, this is Kurt fucking Cobain that I'm working on, or this is David Bowie that I'm applying, like, makeup to for his funeral. That does add an interesting element to it. It'd be like, and I'm sure a shit ton of pressure to.
It's like I wish he could tell us the things that he's bound by his creed not to. But like, god damn, you're like
stick to the
code.
What I mean. He's so great though
because he's professional. He's a professional.
Yeah, he's consummate professional.
Yeah,
but he suffers our foolish questions and our childish questions. He's the perfect guest because he is a consummate professional. He's very knowledgeable. He's been doing this essentially his whole life.
Oh God, forever.
And
he was.
He'll go anywhere you ask him to go. Respectfully.
When I first met him was in high school, and before he was even graduated out of high school, he was doing it. Mm-hmm. And because he used to have a house that was attached to the mortuary here in East Wenatchee, and through the
it's a life of service in that industry, no question.
No, he used to through the bombest parties, dude.
We talked about that last time.
Oh,
you guys want to go roast some weenies in the crematorium? I'm sure you never would have done that.
No, the house is separated from the mortuum, but like.
But the what is it? Crematorium? Is that the right word? I'm having a hard time.
Yeah, something like that.
It was literally right behind the house. It was just like, you'd never notice it because the chimney was a pretty good-sized chimney, but as Rob talked about, they ran it at night, so not to freak everybody out with this giant black cloud of death, which I thought was interesting too. But anyway, we should save all this until we bring him on. But that's a good teaser, and I know a lot of you are looking forward to having Rob back on. But I hate to start the festivities with anything other than spookery, but I do have to say, my laptop is dying. I'm really hard on laptops. How many laptops have I gone through in the span of this podcast? But these days, I basically just do nothing on that laptop but build a magazine. occasionally porn. Mostly building the magazine. And it's all up in the cloud now, but there are a lot of things. It's like, it's not dead. It's just all the telltale signs. It's like, okay, I better get business taken care of. First porn, and then uploading all the shit into the cloud. Pretty mindless work, but there's a lot of files, a lot of little logos, and all my InDesign settings that I got to transfer up into the cloud so I can access it, not just from my Mac, but anywhere. Anyway, so I wanted a program to have on the background. And I don't know how I have not heard about this show until something popped up on my Facebook feed. I'm like, oh, when's that coming out? It's a show called The Offer, and it's on Paramount Plus, and it's a 12-episode biopic, essentially, of the making of The Godfather, and it is
I've heard this is good.
Fucking incredible. It's one of the best shows I've ever seen. Like, it's stylish. It's so well acted. It's so well directed. It's like, who made this fucking thing? It's brilliant. And it's all based on the producer of The Godfather's experiences. I knew a lot of these broad strokes. These are famous stories. The Godfather's often number one, even above Citizen Kane, depending on which list you're looking at of the greatest films of all time. It's definitely consistently in the top 5. So you couldn't really be talking about a more famous movie, and these are famous stories. But there's still a ton of shit that I didn't know, and it's like, I'm sure a lot of it is stitched together in fictional ways. You have to. But I highly fucking recommend. And now this is a controversial stance, I understand. I'm not a huge fan of The Godfather. I love Godfather 2, and I think most people agree that this is one of those rare scenarios where the sequel, part 2, is better than part 1, even among film aficionados. That's not me saying this.
Yeah.
It's a very common thought. And I'm one of those people.
I've never seen any of them.
But The Godfather always just bored the shit out of me. And it still kind of does. Like, I can appreciate it now in ways that I didn't when I was younger. But this show, I'm only saying that because, like, I'm not a huge fan of this movie. This great fucking American classic movie is not one of my favorite movies. And I still was deeply enthralled with this show. It's just so well done. Now, I will swing it back into spooky before we move on. I did, after mentioning the real story behind The Watcher, I streamed all 6 or 8 of those episodes. And it was a fun watch. It was intriguing, and it held my interest. But ultimately, I don't know. I do recommend it, but I recommend it not nearly as wholeheartedly as I do The Offer. Everyone is going to love The Offer. And The Watcher, I was worried about maybe dishing out some spoilers. We gave enough warnings, though, and it was the appropriate amount of warnings. They really go off into their own direction within, like, episode 2, but some of the characters and some of the things that I mentioned definitely come up. They truly paid, not homage, but they told the story, just filling in all of those mysterious blanks with some of their own suggestions. That's all I'll say about it. It's not a horror show, in spite of it being, I think is it Ryan Patrick? Right? Ryan Murphy? Ryan Murphy. That's it. Patrick Murphy? Ryan Fitzpatrick? Or is it Patrick Fitzryan?
Paula Murphy?
It's one of the dudes from American Horror Story. It's not like that at all. If you're going into it thinking you're going to see that kind of thing, it's not. But I thought there were some interesting ideas. Like, this whole thing is about, well, what could this have been? Who could it have been? And I thought they did an interesting job presenting that. So I do recommend it. I thought it was worth a watch. But holy shit, get your asses to Paramount Plus and watch The Offer. I'm on episode 9. I can't see how there's going to be another season. So I think this is a one-off because they've almost got the movie shot. But the craziness with how it came to be, all the kooky players that got involved, it's, I know enough of those stories to know that it's based pretty heavily on fact. But even if you don't care about that, it's immediately entertaining and really well done. I think it's one of the best fucking shows I've seen in a long time. And I don't know why no one's talking about it, at least in my circle. The only person I reached out to, Leah, to tell her about it, was like, because she loves The Godfather, but she also loves finding these little series. I was like, you got to check this out if you haven't seen it. She's like, oh my God, that was one of my favorite shows ever. I was like, okay, well, there's someone that knew about it, but I don't see anyone talking about it. This should be huge. Probably is. Anywho, let's get back to the spookery stuff. So, we got a lot to cover before we get our guest on. I don't know what's up with John Mark, but as I mentioned, I have a whole bunch of little tidbits. But first of all, it's a shame John Mark isn't on here. Let me try him one more time. Have you guys tried him at all?
Did.
Oh, you just did? That helps. Oh, yeah, he's still in the yellow. Although, he kind of is always in the yellow on Skype.
Mm-hmm.
Before we get going, I found this little list, and I thought this was interesting. Take a guess at the number one way people injure themselves around Halloween time.
Number one way.
Just throw it all out there. What's the first thing? That comes?
Costume making, like cuts.
Yeah, that's a good guess.
I would say installing decorations around the house.
Ooh, that's a good one. That wasn't on the list. Now, costume was on the list. That's a good one, though, Lyle, because that's certainly how a lot of people die or are injured around Christmas time. Good Lord. But number one is carving pumpkins. It's kind of like, of course. But almost 5,000 people every year go to the ER from pumpkin carving mishaps.
That's crazy.
That
I would not have. I mean, it makes perfect sense.
It
but
does
I would
make
not
sense.
I would not have put that on my list. Yeah.
No, yeah, I don't think I would have either. But also high on the list, as Christopher guessed, is costume-related injuries. Now, that could be from overheating in the costume, or having some sort of allergic reaction to the makeup or the paint. You know, a lot of people DIY their costumes and they don't even bother to get facial glue or face paint. They'll just wing it with rubber cement and whatever's in the garage. Recipe for a trip to the E-dang-R. Or, like Anna 2 from Mobile, Alabama, who put fangs on to dress like a zombie for some reason. That's usually associated with another Halloween staple, but she could not get those fake fangs off her real teeth, so she probably used some sort of like heavier duty glue that was not meant for tooths. So she needed an emergency visit to the dentist, and they had to pry them off. Now get this.
Oh no.
The dentist could not numb her mouth during this because he needed her response to pain as a warning for when he has broken through the fake teeth and gotten to the real teeth, because he couldn't see what he was doing.
You know, I think I probably just wore the fangs, dude, for a couple months. You know,
Like, this is me now. This is me now.
Yeah, this is me now. They would probably fall off in a few years, right? The problem is they wouldn't wear.
After you chew
evenly.
through a few boxes of Triscuits, they gotta just wear down to nubs anyways, right?
Let's go straight to the grape nuts. No milk. The first 3 minutes of a bowl of grape nuts is definitely eating through some of your fucking zombie fangs, whatever those are. Now, another fall time activity that I don't think most of us would associate with being dangerous, but once it's brought up, makes sense. Hay rides. Part of the problem is these aren't regulated in any way or permitted. You know, they don't issue permits, or they're not consistent in any possible way. And
I'm pretty sure they go by the length of the Daisy Duke. Yeah. You know, the longer they are, the harder you could go. You know, and the shorter they are, the more cautious you should be.
Okay. Well, you know, these aren't horse-drawn wagons. They're often tractors or just straight-up pickups towing, you know, flatbed trailers with hay stacked on. And it's like, hop on up, kids. What could possibly go wrong? Well, as it turns out, lots. There have been several, like, rollovers. The hay will slide off the truck. Kids sliding off the hay and the hay bales falling on top of them. Lots of people have died out on a hay ride. It's pretty fucking sad. I mean, it's just like family and friends out there. But it's kind of shocking to me that it's still allowed. Or even popular. I mean, let's be honest. How fucking fun is a hayride, really? It's not that fun. You're just sitting uncomfortably on a bunch of shit that's going to make you sneeze for 3 days.
Well, yeah.
Driving around and, you know.
I think it's all on
dirt.
who you're with, you know, that really makes a difference, you know what I'm saying?
I see.
But it's a
I've got
literal
whole different take on hayride.
romantic. You know, it's like cruising down through, say, Leavenworth on a sleigh, you know, in the wintertime, and say like Christmas time.
Sure.
You know, jing jing jingling, on my dingling.
Jing jing dingling. I hear those sleigh bells jingling on my dingling, bitch.
Do do do.
Yeah. Well, anyway, so maybe rethink that trip with the little youngins on the hayride. Adults, sure, hop on there if you want to make out in front of a bunch of strangers, sure. But finally, another way that far too many people are dying around Halloween. Now, these aren't huge numbers, but way more than you would guess. People are accidentally killing themselves or being killed as part of haunted house attractions. Now, we've talked about some of these in the past, but several people have died or been seriously injured from getting stuck in nooses, especially at haunted houses. Now, most of these are performers, but occasionally it'll just be a guest, you know, wandering their way through one of these attractions, and they spot a noose, and they do that thing, like goofing off to their friends, or you know, it's like they run ahead, they put their head in it. You could just imagine any of these scenarios, looking for a selfie, whatever, but they end up like getting stuck, and they jump off a thing, or they fall, and suddenly they're being hung, and several people have died. Lots of people have been injured. This is actually something that happens almost every year, people accidentally injuring themselves by putting their head into a noose. So
Nuts.
if you're
Just
out
weird.
there in your, we got locally here. We have the museum does their big haunted museum every year. That's the one of the better haunted house experiences here. And I had my scanner on the other day, as I always do. And one of the things that I heard was somebody was unconscious at the haunted museum. Now, I later found out that they were okay. I think by the time paramedics even arrived, they were already, sustained. So I don't know if it was like a medical thing or if they just... But I thought, man, if you can get that person to make a statement saying, this literally made me call 911, that is a hell of a poster.
Tickets through the roof, right?
Yeah, I think I would be probably more sought to accidentally get myself entangled with like an Iron Maiden versus a noose. You know what I mean?
Never
You
get
just be
into an
like-
Iron Maiden.
Well, you'd be like, "Oh, check this shit out," and your buddy goes, "Ha, yeah, check this out," and they slam it behind it. Jerk off.
That happens in certain horror movies. Iron Maiden stuff. There's even an Iron Maiden reference in Sleepy Hollow.
Bill and Ted's
That's how
Excellent Adventure.
Ichabod's mom dies, right? They put her in the
Oh, yeah,
Iron
yeah.
Maiden. Then he has that dream where they open it up, and she reaches out to him, and it's just like all this blood comes out. I
I forgot about that. No.
The Iron Maiden is one of those things. I feel like we've talked about this. I don't know if the Iron Maiden was one of those things that was actually put into practice, or if it was a concept and someone later discovered the concept. But there are all sorts of torturing that wouldn't even really be. I wonder what that experience would be like. I mean, really, for those of you who don't know, the Iron Maiden is basically an upright sarcophagus with spikes on the walls. So they would shove you in it and close it, and you would be impaled by
Both sides.
who knows how many fucking spikes. Now, you gotta imagine, this is not likely to be an instant death because the spikes aren't in your head, and they often leave little windows for your eyes to bulge out as you watch any witnesses watching you die. Imagine what that feeling must feel like.
a lot of those arteries, if you have like a spike that goes through it, as long as it's not pulled out, would probably keep you alive for a little while.
Yeah.
Because
That's
it's
the
blocking
thing.
the hole, and you're not bleeding to death.
That's like on what was the movie? The Signs. Remember when Mel Gibson's wife was got hit by I believe it was M.
He's like,
Night
you've got
Shyamalan.
10 minutes before we back out, and she falls apart, basically.
Yeah, the car was holding her together. That happens. That's not like made up tomfoolery. So these pins would have to do that to some degree. Whew, what a weird sensation. Whew. Good for the spooky around the campfire episode. So I'm going to save my stuff until you guys get your stuff out of the way, because I can pick and choose if we run short on time. I don't want to hog all the
I have a quick
spotlight.
one. Right now, my cough's a little suppressed. For some odd reason, I instantly just got stuck coughing.
And
while I
once
was
it's
trying to
going, it's
talk
like
to you.
so hard to stop. I'm still fighting a cough 3 weeks after COVID.
Well, it was my favorite story because me and my dad, we've been hanging out and talking lately, and he's not all there. When he had his aneurysm and stuff, he's not. He doesn't know from the past, the future, to anything else, if anything was real or not. He doesn't really know.
Right.
And we were sitting there talking, and we're talking about Ouija boards. And if for the younger, I guess, viewers that haven't listened to the podcast in quite a while, one year we did this, and I told the story about how my mother and their siblings used to play with Ouija boards in Seattle back in the 60s. And what would happen was the planchet, which is the centerpiece you use, you all put your hand on it.
Yeah. Highlights the letter or whatever. Yeah.
Does like a figure eight, and you talk to people, whatever. It launched off the Ouija board and fucking shot across the room.
Yeah.
It's a real deal. I mean, this is their story. This is, I wasn't there. I wasn't even born yet.
I won't fuck with Ouija boards, man. I just won't. I don't even care if it says Parker Brothers on the box, and I know that some of them do.
Yeah, oh yeah. Well, my dad was trying to tell me the story because I brought that up. My grandma actually had haunted her trailer she used to live in over by SeaTac. They when she passed away, the siblings, closest siblings to her, basically got together, sold it, and split the profit. and the person that bought it in regrets because she was definitely haunting the place. She was very very clean person. If you left a fucking dish out or anything like that, she would just be furious, in life, And so the person that bought the place was kind of probably working 16 hours a day, didn't have time to fucking clean up after himself and stuff like that. He had his girlfriend at the time, I believe, with the child together, move in, and plates would levitate and fly across the room and shatter across the wall. And you're like, what the fuck? And she was like, fuck you, I'm gone, I'm taking the kid.
Yeah.
And left. And so he was stuck by himself, working all these hours trying to pay off this trailer, so he could just have a life, and he pleaded with my aunt that lived right down, the road, if she could get together some family members to come and bless the house and to kind of like free her up. And last time I heard anything about it, because I wasn't around during that time, obviously, but pretty spooky. Talk about, but it's not. That's not the story I'm bringing. I'm just recapping on the story that I told before.
But before you get on, I just want to say, I don't see handling that scenario in any other way but getting the fuck out of that place.
Right? What do you do? I mean, it was just a little double wide trailer. It's nothing. It wasn't like a fancy fucking mansion. She was poor.
Easier. Well, exactly. Easier said than done, though, especially for the poor. You can't just pick up and leave. But
it's true.
I'm so glad I don't have experiences with things falling across the room.
Well, me and my dad were talking about that the whole incident about my mom and her brothers and sisters doing that, and he was like trying to come up with his story because he doesn't talk about weird shit like that. Me and my mom, we could sit down and talk about shit like that for hours, but my dad, for some reason, he's scared by it. He's honestly scared by it. Okay. And so he was telling me a story about how when he was out, because he grew up in Palisades,
Desert Cliff region, for those who don't know.
It's in the middle of nowhere, and especially back then, it wasn't completely in the middle of nowhere. He was. He's 73 now. You can imagine there was nothing to do. You literally had to ride horses to school.
Yeah.
And back in the day, and I mean, for really reals.
Mm-hmm.
But so they had a flood apparently. What he was trying to describe to me is a flood. And they do every year. They have a huge flood. Palisades throughout those wheat fields, they just fill up, and the water literally goes from the wheat fields about 7 to 8 feet. On the roadside. And when they have those floods, it is fucking eerie and fucking creepy, dude. Because that water from the roadsides will all fucking reach right up to the water at the road. And so when you're driving in the road, but like it feels like you're driving through like a lake. It's something to see if you haven't gone through it.
Surreal.
So anyway, this had happened when he was a kid. They had a big old flood, and they went back to the house, and he was looking through what he told me was the basement, and he said it was mud. It was completely filled with mud. Except for there was a Ouija board we had down there, and the planchet was completely dry, and where it said goodbye was completely cleared.
No.
But everything else, it was just everything. I mean, literally everything in that fucking basement was covered in mud.
No. Don't like.
That's the story, man, and he swears by it. I got this recently from him from like a couple weeks ago.
That's interesting. Wow.
Yeah.
Isn't it funny how things can come out like that? I still hear shit from my dad every now and again. It's like, how the fuck have you never told that story?
Yeah, I'd love to hear his Bigfoot stories, dude.
Oh, he's got some. Well, the thing about him
and like Paul and Bob Gimlin together.
My dad told Bob Gimlin his personal Bigfoot stories. It was kind of an amazing moment for me. I've never had a good relationship
were you in the room
with
for
my
that?
dad. Yeah. Oh yeah, that was at the thing at the radar station. As I've mentioned from time to time, I love my dad, and I know he loves me, and he's been there all along, but not really been there all along at the same time. He's very aloof and very much a lone wolf, like I am. It took me growing up to realize that didn't mean he didn't care about me. He just needs to be in his own fucking world. I get that now.
He seemed to me when we were growing up as kids, it seemed to me like he was just a fucking workaholic, and he was just gone all the time doing work.
Yeah,
he
just wanted to be out in the woods. And but yeah, that was a magical moment. But these things with like Ouija boards and all this, I am a believer. It's funny because I still don't really know what I believe in terms of like an afterlife and the soul and the spirit and all that. That's kind of always a revolving door for me. I'm just always trying to work that out in my head and what feels right. But I do have this belief that whether it's a Ouija board, even if it does say Parker Brothers on the side of the box, or it's some like a stone you found in your yard, I believe in the power of objects. I believe in the power of what are they called? Like oracles? Is that the right word? Yeah, oracles. Where you are basically using this object as... what's funny is that most religions have a type of oracle, if you will.
Well, I thought
it's a rosary for...
like people.
Huh?
I thought oracles were people, like people you'd go to see. Like, see you're troublesome and you wanted to cure
the wrong
curse.
Thing.
You come to me because I'm an oracle. You're thinking about it's not an heirloom. It's what you're talking about is like priests. They'll cut off their fingers when they die, and then they'll put them in a shadow box, and then that is to the religion. That is a whatever. Not a tribute. It's gonna kill me because I'm gonna think about it too long.
You're probably trying to think of the same word that I'm trying to think of.
Exactly.
But it's just it's like this object.
An offering
that means something to you. An
altar. It's not an offering.
An altar or
it's the whole purpose of it is to basically it has God's power in it. You know what I mean? It's like this is infused with a
relic
yes, a relic.
A religious relic.
Exactly what it is. Relic is what I was thinking.
See, well, it's got a C in it. Anyway, yeah, I do believe in those sort of devices, for lack of a better word, as something to put your energy in. It's really just a meditative thing. Again, whether we're talking about rosary beads to pray, or some sort of lucky charm, or some sort of there's meditation beads. There are all sorts of things like crucifixions and things that people carry with them, and they sort of, or even like a worrying stone. There's something about just like a tangible object that I think might help us get to a more open state of mind for possibility of communicating with some other
I think when
I don't want it.
When I was younger, I think I had one in the back of my wallet, and I put a little ring in it, and I worried about it a lot for about 12 years in my younger youth. I'm like, maybe someday. Is it tonight? No.
Maybe this is the one. Yeah. Well, that's you gotta. Some worrying stones you gotta replace every 3 months.
Exactly.
Chris, what you got for us?
Christopher.
Oh, we lost Chris. I guess I could just look across the campfire and see that he's not here.
Oh my!
God, I left for 1 second.
Well,
Take care of my
he's
kid.
back.
Fuck me.
I know.
Of course.
Hi guys.
Oh hi.
What's up, buddy?
Did John Mark make it? I see he's maybe half in.
Kind of half in, half out.
I don't see him.
I'm sure he's busy. I mean, it's weird.
Oh, there he is.
What are you talking about? I'm right here.
Welcome.
Scary deer.
What's up, brother?
He was hiding behind the log.
Nice.
Pulling yourself up to the
Good to
fire,
see you,
get
buddy.
warm, and it's Christopher's turn.
Some of that dark beer.
It's chilly out there.
It is. I got a pumpkin ale going here. I know Christopher loves
Pumpkin
it.
ale.
Am I the only one on the show that loves pumpkin ale?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
I thought so. I probably asked
Fucking
that
cowboy.
All right, Chris, your show.
I didn't have a spooky tale to tell, but I do have a story I want to tell. But before that, I thought I would do a recount, and I've told this story a couple of times on the podcast. But
The balloons.
the balloon story. No, I'm not sure. I'm not sure.
That was the one I thought you were heading toward too.
The balloon story, where the balloons followed you.
Oh,
Yeah, they're thinking of you.
no, that was creepy. Sorry. Balloon.
See, the cough's going
this is
around
really-
everywhere.
This is emotional for Chris. He's getting choked up.
Everybody's got the cough tonight.
I truly am. Hold on. I got some in my throat.
Well, I've been
All right.
pausing. I've been trying to keep it clean.
Well,
Well,
we're all just holding back cough.
I like fed the kid, right? I didn't have time to feed myself, so I just
Crap.
grabbed a piece of bread and like crammed it in my throat as I was reprimanding him, and I'm choking on it. No big deal.
I'm not finished.
The kid's
I
like,
wasn't-
that's an ironic twist, Father.
I wasn't finished with the story though, guys. I'm sorry.
Oh, good.
I fucked up. So this beautiful woman of a person, she she got sick. She knew it was coming, right? And this is a post. This is a tweet from her granddaughter, Grace Perlman. She tweeted this picture and said, "Received this from my grandma's funeral. What an icon." And so what she did is, this is her grandmother. She went and had a bunch of these made up for her funeral, and it was the most epic thing. I wish I
saw this. Right?
I wish I would think of this before I would get a
Trigger warning, Ron. Trigger warning.
Where's
Don't
this
play
coming?
with the planchette. It's coming off a text. But she
had
these.
That's kind of cute, actually.
At 71
Yeah.
at 71 years old, she decided that she would put this together as a tongue-in-cheek gag at her funeral, so everybody would, it'd be a little bit more lighthearted, And it says, in this one in particular, it said, "Let's keep in touch," and it's got a picture of her flipping the bird, and then like a Ouija board with the little
Tongue out.
planchette. That works.
It looks like
fucking
a
great.
real, like it's
Yeah.
it's all paper, but it's a separate planchette that you can actually
Fucking
use.
great.
Move it around.
I would
Oh,
I would
Grams.
love to get that from a friend that passed. Like,
Yeah.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Make me feel better about it.
Yeah.
I
I
don't know
keep.
that I'd try it though.
I know
No,
you wouldn't.
No, no.
Think about it though, Ron.
I still keep most of my friends' funeral stuff
Funeral,
like that.
yeah.
I've,
It's a
when I-
sad collection, isn't it?
Oh, dude, Jesus Christ! When I moved,
I just got my first
like
piece of
20
that.
of
That's
them.
funny.
Yeah. You'll get there, Chris.
Oh, good.
Any day you'll have a whole shoebox full of funeral things.
Hey,
yeah,
Chris,
it is,
I'm not-
It does feel
I'm
weird to
not
throw
feeling
them
that
away.
good.
It does feel weird to throw them away. Okay, Chris. Sorry about that.
Uh,
Version?
No. My favorite spooky tale that I've told a couple of times on this was the day that the Ronster came to my house to go garage sailing. He pulled up to my house and he said, "Hot damn, do you realize you live across the street from one of the most infamous murder houses in Wenatchee?"
Yeah.
Whoa!
I'll never forget that day. And so, of course, we spent the better half of the afternoon talking about it, and I would go on to pull all the newspaper articles about it because it happened. I'll just give a quick recount of it, and it's fucking fascinating.
Yeah.
It was like 1982 or so, right around there. Does that sound right?
I think it was closer to 90.
Was it in late 80s,
Yeah.
perhaps?
Yeah.
You think so? I thought it was
Yeah.
late '80s.
No,
Early.
I think, well, whatever.
Yeah.
I feel like I was coming of age at that point. I don't think I was a little kid.
Well,
We'll call it- we'll call
when
it
I
86.
remember, well, dude, remember when I heard it, it was already an old thing. Like I almost thought it was like 70s, almost
No.
like early 80s.
No.
Well,
Yeah,
90s,
Well,
huh?
Chris, you tell the story. I'll see if I can find out the date.
Yeah, I was just gonna go. Okay, yeah. So, this guy was living at home with his mom. I think he was around 20 of age, maybe a little bit older.
Yeah.
And it was like 6 in the morning on Halloween. And
Halloween.
he got into an argument with her of sorts, and it turned into a physical argument.
Altercation.
And he picked up basically the machete he had in the house for some reason or another, and started to attack her. Chased her out of the house. And as she was getting out the front door, he took one good swing and totally decapitated her. And her
whoop.
body fell down the steps, and her head tumbled down. And then he calmly went back inside, turned the TV on, pulled himself a couple bowls of cereal, and just had a morning.
Yeah.
And kids were walking past this house. The high school's close to there, on the way to high school, or junior high, I believe even. And
Oh, yeah.
All of the
everyone
schools,
thought
basically.
everyone, yeah, it's like right on the school. Like
That's
fucking
pretty
right.
ghetto area too. So
Everyone thought it was a Halloween decoration until somebody took a closer look and called like 4 hours later. Called the police. Police show up, arrest the guy. Said the voices made me do it, etc. And then he would go on to get admitted to a psychiatric hospital in Wenatchee, and that's where I lost track of him. I like had all the court articles and everything. It was I put a little website together for a bit on my own personal server.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, now he lives in
you found
Bremerton,
old pictures of the house, right?
I live in Bremerton.
What?
Yeah, I did. It was wild, man. Right across the street from my house. I always think about that. Man.
He lives in
know,
Bremerton now. Is that what Lyle's like?
Yeah, that's what I was like. Yeah. Strangely,
He's like, hi again.
I'm back.
I don't know how you keep finding me. I'm not able to pull it up. I know I found it last time we talked about it, but anyway,
Yeah.
I would guess, mid to late 80s.
I feel like it was like 86 or something like that.
Yeah.
86 or 87.
You know.
'Cause, I mean, it felt like it was like right before my time, but because like if it was in the late '90s, there's no fucking way. Because
No, it wasn't. It definitely wasn't.
That would have happened like right then.
I believe it was
I
in
heard
the
about it.
80s, but I think I was saying it was closer to 90. Not. It definitely wasn't in the 90s. Now that was a famous story, and it sounds like urban legend, but it's simply not.
That's real.
And can you imagine? This is one of those stories where it's like, when those kids found out late, they had to have found out at some point. It's like, Jesus Christ, that head that we thought
real.
was really fucking realistic looking and super cool. And if
Poke
we
the
had
stick at
iPhones
it.
at the time, we would have taken pictures. But we all looked at it and was like, holy shit, that's creepy. Look at how the blood's dripping
God.
down from the cement steps. And then later on, they're having to like get there in their head, like, oh no, that was his fucking mother's head. And he was inside having Lucky Charms watching cartoons. Jesus.
See, I always thought that
Right
he
across the
brought
street from Chris.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I thought he brought the head inside with him to watch cartoons, but I don't know. That's kind of the version I've heard.
We
but
need to find.
something like that. It's so God.
I
man,
promise you,
there's
this
probably-
is not urban legend, folks. This is a
No,
real
there's
one.
probably like 30
And Chris,
different
like you
takes
said,
on this whole
you did your.
I pulled all the
Yeah, you found the details, some things that I didn't even know, because we told the story. We knew about it. When you're kids, you're not reading the newspaper. You're not really watching the news so much as listening to your parents describe a thing, or your other friends describing a thing, or a teacher. So we all heard it in our own variety of ways, but we knew it was true.
Yeah, well, you know how that shit was leaked out too to us as kids. Is like your parents are they're reading the newspaper, and then they got a bad reaction. You're like, "Yo, what's going on?" And, don't worry about it. Go to your room or whatever. And they would take that newspaper and try to destroy it, and then we'd pull it out of the garbage and go, "Oh, that's why," Because there's no TV. We didn't have TV back then. Come on, kids.
Not worth watching. Even
Not
I was
3
thinking about
channels.
that the other day. It's like, even if you had cable, we weren't sitting around watching TV all day. There was nothing to watch. There certainly wasn't
we're
anything to watch
outside.
in the daytime. It was all talk shows and infomercials about old people shit. Well, John Mark, did you have something to bring to the campfire tonight?
Well, I have a story that I probably told before. I can't remember specifically if I have. It's been
Not Scary Deers, is it?
how many?
Oh,
No,
okay.
I remember that one.
That was the original story.
But
John Mark drunker than I've ever seen him.
I seen.
He slurred.
I
For those of
seen-
you who wonder what we're talking about, go back and find the original Tales from a Space Pod Halloween episode. John Mark was so drunk he slurred the word "okay." Okay. So here's the thing. I think Christopher took a very memorable for posterity photo of you falling asleep in your hand. Yeah, really good stuff. Sorry.
Well, that's when we used to do the podcast together all in one
I
room.
know, I
man.
miss
That
it.
was
I
fun
miss it.
times.
It was a
I
whole
mean, around the
different
same
vibe.
campfire.
Wacky times. All right, John Mark.
So, it's not necessarily creepy, but it's weird and mysterious. So, back when I lived in Wenatchee, and I want to say this was probably like 94 or 95. I was living with a buddy of mine, and he had gone to, I think, like Yakima or the Gorge or something like that. And he came home. It was at nighttime. He got home finally. And he comes in. He was very animated and excited. He's like, dude, I gotta tell you something. I was like, what? What's going on? So he pulls me into the back and into his bedroom. He's like, I need to talk to you. He's like, he didn't want for some reason, he didn't want anybody else to hear. He's like, dude, I just saw a fucking UFO. And I was like, what are you talking about? He's like, yeah. So I guess he was with somebody else too. They were driving back, and they came across a spot that there was a bunch of cars, like a whole bunch of cars parked on the side of the road. And it wasn't like, something where there was like a trail or anything that people would normally be parked there for. So they I guess they got curious and they're like, let's pull over and see what's going on. So they pull over, they get out, walk across the highway, and they find this like a little trail down to some sort of lake or something down there. And he said that he got down there, and I think now that I think about it, he said that there was like a news van parked there too. And he was like, whoa, what's going on? So they get down there. There's a whole bunch of people standing on the side of this lake, and they're all looking out in the middle of it. And there's just like this object hovering over the middle of the lake, like totally silent. Just like he said, it was pretty big, but just sitting there hovering over the lake, not really doing anything, but definitely something that you've never seen before. And he asked the people that were there, there was the news crew that was there, he's like, hey, is this going to be on the news? And they're like, oh yeah, it's going to be on the news later. And came home, told me all about it, and I was like, holy shit, that's crazy. And then watched the news, and nothing. Of course.
Yeah.
USOs,
man. USOs.
But I haven't personally, to my remembrance anyway, seen something like that I could definitely say, yeah, I saw UFO. It was fucking weird, and this is what happened. I remember it clear as day. So that was kind of, one of the closer experiences I've got to having, someone, say I was like right there, and it was like 100 yards away. Yeah. And everybody was there, was just like, what are we looking at? What's going on here?
So this is coming out of the lake, yeah.
It was just hovering over the water, yeah. Just
over the water,
yeah.
USOs.
It was just there, not moving, just there.
Was it
who knows what?
Unidentified submergible objects is what they call them. I'm not even joking.
USO, UAP is what they call them now. Unidentified aerial phenomenon.
Well, what do you say when you're in the bath with a woman, right, Lyle?
Looks like we got a USO going on.
Dive her down.
I keep thinking
that Van Halen album makes way more sense.
Get a hold of him and say, hey, remember that time you told me that story about seeing that UFO?
I have no idea what you are talking about. I have to go by.
I have been raving off.
Well, you guys know
that never happened.
I have not had experiences with ghosty type stuff. Never saw what I can truly say was some sort of Sasquatch type sighting. But that I have seen me some fucking UFO shit, man. That is what I have been #blessed with. And I can tell you, the feeling is bone-chilling. It's perfect for around the campfire talk.
Hashtag anal probe.
Go back and listen to episode 2 of Tales from the Space Pod if you can find them out there. Because that will be, the Ronster gets into all of his. Although there was one later, remember the one that I saw right out in the orchard, that little flying orb. Mm-hmm. That wasn't all that long ago. These others were about a decade ago or so.
That made me want to fire up my drone and sneak over to your place and just kind of hover it around your window a little bit.
I remember at the time thinking, well, that's got to be some sort of drone. But now, knowing what I know about drones now, it's like there's no way that was a fucking drone. Well, now it could possibly be, but not in 2015.
Well, 2015, even then, you'd still had a red and a green light on them. It's
noise.
It's navical.
It's
air. Well, it's air. It's water. It's nautical. It's for directions. Your port side is your green side. It's your left side, or your right side. Sorry. And your port's your right.
You put your port
your
side
left.
in. You put your port side out.
But in the flying of drones and planes and anything like that that's airborne, that you have to have a license to fly, they're all the same. And the same with boats. You know what I mean? That's what I learned recently this year. The same as boats. So
that's interesting. I didn't know that.
And you have to have them on at night. So you know where the boat is facing and where it's heading to give the right of way on the water and whatnot. And the airspace.
Did you have anything else, John Mark? I think John Mark. Oh, he's off peeing in the woods.
No, I was looking for something. I couldn't really like. I might have something in a minute. Give me a minute.
Well, okay, you think about it. I got plenty to get to. Interrupt any time. I'm going to open my little trunk of wonders and creepy tales, and we'll move through a handful of these before we get our guest on. But the first thing that I came across in my wondrous travels was the delightful tale of the Roman Emperor Tiberius, who, among many other horrible things, tied men's penises shut so that their bladders would burst.
That's no fun.
Now, one time, he was so unsatisfied with the peasant's gift of a fish that he had guards rub the scales of the fish onto the peasant's face, and the subject apparently said, "I'm so relieved he didn't gift me with a crab instead." So Tiberius next had his guards fetch a crab and use its claws on him in all the places that you would guess. That wily, cantankerous Tiberius, fucking Joffrey in real life, man, tied penises shut so their bladders would burst, and would sit and watch until they did. It was like his own personal little urine-related fireworks show.
Okay. What I'm thinking about is like, what if you were to like, because that would be like the ultimate of almost torture, but like in the Roman sense, it'd be like a gladiatorism. But if you tied your wieners together and then you like kind of fought away to see which one would break off first.
Well, I'm gonna burst you first. The first to burst gets the worst. Well, up next, you'll appreciate this, Lyle. You love a good archaeological story. This is a creepy little archaeological discovery. In 2012, a team of archaeologists excavating a palace in Avaris, Egypt, made a pretty gruesome discovery. There were 4 pits that were dug out near the throne room of the palace, and when they were excavated, they revealed nothing but the bones of severed hands. But don't worry, you guys. They were only interested in righties, apparently. So the rest of you... Am I the only one? Am I the only right-handed guy on this show? I think you all are southpaws.
I'm a lefty.
That defies odds.
Southpaws.
I'm left-handed.
Yeah, that's so strange.
Around the campfire, who's what?
The gruesome... Well, I think you all are southpaws, except me.
Chris. Chris.
Yeah, he just said he's lefty.
Oh,
We've established that. I'm pretty sure John Mark is a lefty.
John Mark?
John Mark's
Indeed, yeah.
Oh,
that's weird, right? Like 3 out of 4.
I'm kind of ambidextrous.
Well, I used to be ambidextrous.
Left-hand dominant.
Yeah. I used to be ambidextrous when I was a kid, and then I just gave it up and said fuck it and went with the left because I was better at it and I could draw with my left hand.
So, I write and draw and like eat and stuff like that with my left hand.
Yeah.
Anything with power though, right hand.
But when I was a kid, they were like, well, he's left-handed, so they gave me like left-handed scissors, and I was like, what the fuck is this shit?
Yeah, these don't work.
And like a left-handed baseball glove and stuff. I'm like, this doesn't work. What is happening? No. So like I would do things so like say playing a musical instrument, even though I'm left-handed, I play it like a right-handed person would. And same with like shooting a gun or a bow and arrow, things like that. Like I would
bowling. Do you bowl right-handed?
Yeah, I do. Yeah,
I throw baseball right-handed. Yeah, we're identical.
Yep. Yeah.
I do that left-handed. Throwing a ball and stuff. I do left-handed.
I saw somebody.
We're talking over each other too much this episode.
Somebody had commented on like a picture of Kurt Cobain, saying that because I think it showed him when he was a bit younger, like holding like a pencil or a paintbrush or something in his right hand. Mm-hmm. And then somebody was like, "Oh yeah, he was actually right hand dominant, but he played guitar left handed."
That's interesting.
And I couldn't find. I tried to research it, but I couldn't find anything definitive if that was true or not. But it makes sense to me because I'm kind of the same way, but the opposite. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So if he was actually right-handed, that would make sense because he was like, well, the right hand is the one that I'm the most comfortable with, so that makes sense to use as on the fretboard, right? Because it's the most intricate part of playing a guitar. So like for me, it makes sense because it's like the left hand. I don't know, but
Yeah.
anyways, I just thought that was interesting.
I just wanted a quick poll, but I just think it's fucking weird. I would still consider you at least a honorary Southpaw, John Mark, and I still think it's weird that 3 out of the 4 of us are fucking left-handed. I think that's very weird. I don't think that computes with the international odds, from what I've heard.
Yeah, it is definitely strange.
But the right hand in this story probably represents a couple things. Historians think that they cut, I mean, obviously, if you just say only cut off the right hand, that means that, well, let me finish my thought here. The right hand means a couple things. One of those is there have been these long thought legends of these ancient soldiers being paid a ransom for each right hand of the enemy that they would bring the king. In other words, here's my receipt that I've been out doing your bidding and killing the enemies. Now, if they just made it, they could have picked left hand, I suppose, but right hand works because you get one hand per victim, right? You couldn't say, oh, no, this is the left hand of another victim. The other reason is interesting because a lot of these people believed in ancient times that the right hand represented the strength of your spirit. So cutting off your right hand was a little bit of an extra evil twist to sever that from the body and send someone to the afterlife without the power that they lived in, that they enjoyed in life. So a little tidbit for you. Now this is interesting. Why reach for a refreshing glass of Nestle Quick when you can pour yourself a little powdered mummy? I am going to say that again.
Come again?
Powdered
mummy.
Mummy. Now this is a phenomenon that has become insanely collectible amongst antiquity dealers because there are actually vials and bottles of powdered mummy found throughout the world from different eras. And where this
I keep waiting for the joke here.
There's no joke. I mean, I'm sure there's a joke there to be made, but no, this is a real fucking thing. Where this seems to come from is tied to how the ancient Egyptians especially, but also other ancient civilizations, how they treated the dead using specific herbs and natural chemicals and other elements that are known or thought at one point to have healing and medicinal properties. Ergo, someone along the way got the great idea of, well, let's grind up some ancient motherfuckers and sell it at carnivals as miracle medicine. This really happened, and it happened all the way up until quite recently. But it wasn't just snake oil salesmen or carnival barkers. Some of the earliest pioneers of the pharmaceutical industry genuinely believed in the potential medicinal benefits of ingesting powdered mummy. But my thought while reading this was like, this, you gotta know, somebody out there, somewhere over all the eons, somebody has snorted mummy powder, right?
Yeah, I mean, it has to have.
Snorted a mummy. That's a thought. It's also a thought of just ingesting powdered mummy. Everything about it is just like, I don't know. There's something troubling to me. But let's wash that off with a charming tale involving sisterly love and other things. This is the story of the Silent Twins. Raised in Wales, Jennifer and June both refused to talk, like at all, to anyone except to each other in a made-up language. They had kind of a funny relationship. They were definitely from basically birth. They were just odd girls, but their relationship was funny in that they were best friends, but they were also dire enemies who genuinely tried to kill one another. Now, I know that can sound like a lot of siblings, especially when you get into those teen years, and you think you're trying to kill. No, these bitches were legitimately trying to kill each other over and over and over again. This was, I think, in the 1950s, 1960s is when they were born. Maybe a little earlier than that. But these attempts grew more and more serious, and their parents eventually ended up planning on having them committed for psychiatric evaluation. And during their hospital stay, the twins agreed that they're never going to be able to live normal lives as long as both of them were alive. They thought that what made them weird was having two of them. So Jennifer apparently agreed that she would be the one to die. Interestingly, the very next day that they made that pact, the pair were being transferred to a different hospital, and Jennifer suddenly died of a freak heart condition that was never really explained. Now, June went on to live a fairly normal life. She began communicating and adjusted into society as good as she could, and she was the one that shared all that story. That they had their own little world, but they knew, even as youngsters, that this isn't right. Like, we cannot both be here. Sometimes you just got to ditch your twin, brah. That was very compelling. Creepy. Moving on. Oh, I'm excited about this one because this one has a photo I'm going to send you. We talk about the bodies exhibit quite frequently on the show. It just comes up from time to time, usually involving the Ronsters' interest in whether or not they taste like ham.
Yeah, I'm thinking of ham right now.
Here's something, I suppose, similar, but even, I think, more horrifying. Underneath, I think it's pronounced Coppola Sansevieria in Naples, are several... Wait a minute, is it Naples? It's Naples, right? Or is it Nepal? Why did I call it Nepal's?
Where? In Italy?
Yeah.
Italy.
What are we talking about?
Naples.
Yeah, Naples.
I don't know why I felt the urge to make it more fancy. Anyways, underneath Nepal's are several bodies whose circular systems have been completely preserved with metal. Now, nobody really knows exactly how this was done, but most experts believe it was the evil doings of 8th century inventor Raimondo de Sandro, who out of boredom or curiosity or evilness injected liquid metal into some of
they made him
his
Wolverine, basically?
servants. Now, I want you to look at this. This looks exactly like the fucking bodies exhibit, except it's metal. This is fucking fascinating. And, you know, these are ancient. So this is not some kooky sculptor. All of those arteries and nerves are preserved in metal.
Oh, my God, the pain these people felt. It had to have been, like, hot liquid metal, right? Like,
Yeah, that's the theory.
Oh,
that they were literally injected with hot liquid metal as the inventor sat back and watched their suffering, and I'm sure they just kind of melted the flesh around,
But it
revealing
had to have
these
been
sculptures.
multiple injections over multiple locations, too. Not just, like, one and done. Like, this was like,
No.
we're going to start with your leg.
Yeah, I mean, it's got to go through the whole circulatory system.
Wow. That's fucking awful.
Some
Well,
people
you know
go
what the
through
worst
some
part
bad
is?
things.
Like Chris is saying, they had to keep you alive while they did it, and like that shit's like even at the mildest be like a thorn bush growing through your fucking circular veins, you know, your blood veins, you know, because they would get cold and then, you know, harden, but then you keep going and keep going. You know,
I have
keep you alive.
questions.
Dingy wingy.
Yikes.
Well, you and a lot of other people have questions because this theory is debated, but there's no debate about the age of these things. So the question is, if that's not what happened, what did happen? It's just a theory, but that's what most experts agree is a likely theory. I don't think anyone wants to do an experiment to see if this would work this way, but it does seem there are holes. But look at it. I mean, it's exactly what we saw at the bodies exhibit, except in metal and ancient. So how would they have fucking done that? We probably don't even want to know. Moving on quickly because we are about where we need to call our guests, and I gotta stop for a pee break real quick too. But here's a cheerful and charming one for you kids. An elderly blind hoarder named Rita Wolfenson had unknowingly been living with a corpse of her dead son for over 20 years.
No. Charles, you haven't touched your peanut butter and jelly.
Well, it was exactly
What's
like
wrong,
that.
son?
10 days.
Exactly like that. And after he hadn't touched his peanut butter and jelly after 10 days, she assumed that her son had just suddenly decided to move out. And the odor of his decaying...
Charles, are you there?
leaving me like everyone else, bastard.
The odor of his decaying body would have been masked by all the other garbage and rotting food that a blind hoarder would typically amass. Yeah, the whole story is bar fucking city. So it wasn't discovered until Rita needed to go to the hospital. She called 911 for something or other. Paramedics arrived and found the gruesome corpse amongst the garbage and other
God, the
rotting
poor woman
food.
must have been like Why doesn't he ever call me? Charles!
Oh, Charles, you've been here the whole time? Mummy and Mommy, huh? I think that could be turned into a sitcom.
Oh my god.
No?
Well,
Come on,
the
knock on
son
our
must
door.
have been okay with living in that environment as well. So it's like that's how he got caught in there. But can you imagine though if he just came over to like maybe like help her do something and like a stack of books fell on him or something?
Well, it could have been. I don't know if he was just chilling on the couch. It didn't really say it in this article. I did confirm it, though. These are all real. I'm going to skip over a couple here and oh, this is a quick one. Next time you are on a pleasant, relaxing drive in the country, as you pass by one of those giant metal grain silos, which we have all over the place here, keep in mind that over 80 people have died in those things in just the last decade in America. Now, most of these are accidentally stepping off the catwalk in the elevator that they sometimes have. They're not all that sophisticated. Some of the huge ones are. But then they just sink into the grain like quicksand and get stuck, not to be seen again until the next harvest season. 80 people have died in those fucking things. That we had to have driven by in the last 10 years.
Enjoy your Wheaties, folks.
We have to have driven by one of these fucking things, and there was just a body trapped in there, and they hadn't found it yet. I mean, with those numbers, somebody. But I'm going to end on this one, and then we're going to take a quick little break. This, I don't know how I never heard this, but again, I confirmed it. This is real, folks. And I want you to think about this the next time you pour yourself 3 fingers of Jameson Irish whiskey. Oh, smooth and smoky. James Jameson, who was one of the younger heirs to the Jameson forge in the late 19th century, had developed an interest in cannibalism practices, specifically of the Congo region of Africa. He was so intrigued that he actually traveled there. He wanted to see this for himself. And so, through the advisement of a hired translator, he purchased a young slave girl and approached a chief of one of these cannibal tribes and offered up the girl if he could watch them kill and eat her while he sketched what he saw. Now, by the way, the 11-year-old girl that he bought for this was purchased with a handful of fine silk handkerchiefs. No joke. Just a handful of fucking snot rags, as if it wasn't depressing enough. So, as they stabbed and dismembered the girl, Jameson sat there and drew some rough sketches, some of which were allegedly online, but it seems like most of what I saw were just really abstract washes of vibrant red ink. So, how about them shits? I do drink Jameson when it's the only one available, but this does make me thankful that I'm predominantly a Bushmills guy. He bought an 11-year-old slave girl, offered her up to a fucking cannibalistic tribe in the Congo, watched them basically dismember her alive and eat her, just because he was curious. That is the epitome of crazy trust fund kid, right? Ugh. Gotta earn your own money out there, folks. And that is gonna be where I leave it, because how do you top that? Well, we top it by bringing on a real-world Undertaker. Rob The Undertaker, we'll be calling him in just a second. I'm going to pause for a pee break and refill my beer, and we'll be right back.
Hello.
Rob The Undertaker, are you there?
Hey, there he is.
Live and in person. Well, welcome back.
Live and in person. Thank you.
I looked it up. It has been since 2017. Since we last
God, it's
had
been
you
that
on
long.
the show.
That's way too long. Jeez.
You know, I use Skype so little that I it was like the 5th call on my whole Skype list. It was like October 17 of 2017 or something.
That's funny. We used to use Skype all the time for guests. We don't have guests on as much these days. But, yeah, I basically just have these knuckleheads, and then if I scroll down a little bit, it's like the entire history of Tales from the Space Pod. And it's kind of amazing. It's like, I could call Kane Hodder right now. He's right there. He's online. I can see him.
There you go.
Some of these paranormal researchers we used to talk to. Sometimes I accidentally call them when I start the show a little too drunk. Well, I think most of our listeners are going to be familiar with who you are, I want to give you an opportunity to introduce yourself formally. Very brief little history about, I think we summed up at the beginning of the show. It seems like to us, you've known Lyle longer than you've known me, but I've known you for quite a while. I believe we went to school together. I definitely was aware of you. You've basically been doing this your whole life at this point. I mean, essentially.
Yeah, I started when I was 16. I started at age 16. It was kind of a fluke that I got into it. I have an uncle that was worked at the funeral home, one of the local funeral homes, and always joked with the manager that I wanted a job there. He called me up one day and said, I need a ride. And while I was there, the manager talked me into doing a little job interview. The phone rang. It was the hospital. They said, well, no better time than the present to see if you really like this. So we went to the hospital and picked up a decedent. And what it boiled down to was, after watching the embalming process, I was offered the opportunity to drive the person to the funeral home up in Chelan. And I wasn't too excited about it, but then he threw in a free Dusty's hamburger, and I said, okay, I'm in.
But you have to eat it off the corpse.
that was the kicker, a free hamburger.
I heard that.
I think they just closed.
I heard
really?
they just closed. Yeah.
Oh no,
they're gone forever.
I haven't heard confirmation of that, but I do believe Dusty's Burgers. So that's fascinating that you bring that, because they just announced that. Well, it's interesting that you lucked. Well, maybe that's not the right word, but you happened into it. That was one of my questions, is like, how, now that you have been doing this your whole life, and we'll go back to your earlier days in a bit, have you found, there seems to be this purveying, I want to say myth, because I assume it's a myth, that obviously not everyone who's drawn to this sort of work has any interest in anything of the macabre nature, or a fascination with death, or a fascination with even the process. It's just kind of a job that a lot of people pursue. It's like, well, that's something that might be an interesting career. And I mean, talk about picking a career that's got longevity.
Mm-hmm.
Going into certain industries. This idiot that you're talking to right here decided to start a newspaper in 2017, and I hear that that's a good time to get in on print media. But taking care of the dead is something that is always going to be needed, and it is certainly always going to need a personal touch. So there are a lot of reasons to go into that industry other than nefarious or kooky or creepy. Have you encountered anybody that tried to get into the industry that you thought was maybe for the wrong reasons? Like, this guy, he thinks it's going to be creepy and cool, and he can say, oh, I'm an Undertaker, and you maybe weed through some of those, or is that pretty rare?
Well, actually, it's pretty common nowadays. What we're seeing, at least what I'm seeing and going around and talking with folks, is there's a lot of people out there that are looking to get into this profession, that have a huge desire to simply be in the prep room, simply just embalming. And the unfortunate part about that is that embalming is becoming such a lost art that it's not happening as much as it was 10, 20 years ago. So unfortunately, I think that people there's a pretty good idea of getting into it, but I think they're finding that it's not as everything they thought it was going to be cracked up to be. There's a lot more to it than just spending the day in the prep room.
Now, is embalming becoming a less practiced thing because cremating is on the rise, or is it on the rise? Why is embalming less of a thing?
There's really a lot of reasons for it. Definitely, cremation is one. Nationwide, cremation has about an average of 50% cremation rate.
Really?
50% of the people dying. In the state of Washington, we're at about 80, almost 82%.
Wow, that's
so
interesting.
So if you think about 82% of the deaths in Washington are being cremated right now. With that, that's not to say that you can't have embalming with cremation, but people's mindsets are changing. There's definitely a narrative out there that is promoting that embalming is, negative, it's bad. I tend to disagree with that, not just because I've been doing it for my whole life, but when you look at the science of it, the fact that the formaldehyde that's used is actually a natural compound. It's made of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. And, those are all certainly things found in nature.
That's the negative association with embalming, is that it's not, environmentally?
Well, yeah, I read an article the other day that said there's 800,000 gallons of embalming fluid that's poured into the planet every year through cemeteries, and it's just like, oh my gosh, where do you come up with these crazy numbers?
Yeah.
So, but when you look at them, it's always, if you look at who's writing that, there's definitely a narrative behind that of what they're trying to promote, of either a green burial or some other form of disposition, which is fine as well. But I'm of the opinion, get your science straight before you before you go out there. And,
that's so un-American, Rob. We don't want to know how things work. We just want to bark. We just like to yell and bark and make a big stink. And then as soon as we're proven wrong, we just go away and yell and bark at other things. But
there you go.
So obviously embalming is to preserve the body at least long enough to get it into the coffin. I'm sure some of this, there's no way around covering some of the ground that we covered the last time you were on, but I don't remember some of these answers, and I know we have a lot of new listeners now that didn't hear that first show. Are there other reasons to be embalmed other than preservation? I mean, can you, if you're opting to be buried, can a family say, we don't want them embalmed, just let them rot in a coffin in a public cemetery, or are there some sort of regulations that you got to follow?
Well, there's 50 states, 50 different sets of rules. In the state of Washington, there is no legal requirement for embalming.
Okay.
You can have viewing, you can have services, you can do it, any type of disposition. There's no legal reason for embalming. The real purpose for embalming, or I should say there's no legal requirement for it. The real purpose for embalming is to temporarily preserve and to sanitize, primarily for visitation. But it's not a process that's designed, at least modern day embalming is not a process that's designed to long-term preservation. I mean, you're not going to embalm somebody in the hopes that 100 years from now you're going to, dig them up and they're going to look the way they do.
Yeah,
they're not like mummies or anything.
Yeah. No, that's a totally different process that was used for that.
When me and my parents get around talking about it, and because they're in their mid 70s and whatnot, and I'm not really on a very good leg, we talk about it, and they all want to be cremated, and for the reason of being that it's actually the cheapest. They don't want to hassle.
You skip the coffin. You skip the. I assume
the plot. The plot of land. Usually, let's put it in a wall.
Yeah. Well, Rob did say that you can get embalmed and cremated. I suppose that has to do with maybe the viewing.
Primarily, and as far as the cost is concerned, one thing I would tell you is there is something called the Federal Trade Commission, the FTC, and they have something called the funeral rule. You are entitled to go into any funeral home you want to across the country and pick up a general price list. It's called the GPL, or general price list. What that does is it allows you the opportunity to look dollar for dollar, apples for apples, at what each individual funeral home charges for each individual service that they provide. That's a great way to find out, because sometimes, yes, cremation can be less expensive, but in other cases, I've seen cremation actually be more expensive. It just depends on what you're choosing. A natural or a burial doesn't necessarily mean a casket at a church with a cemetery and a vault and a giant headstone. It might be natural burial, in a green burial cemetery with no casket, no embalming, no headstone. There's a lot of different options that are out there.
Just a body in the dirt?
Yeah, that's green burial. Green burial.
I think what they're looking at is to be able to be cremated, partialed, like tiny leather sacks, hippie sacks, and then just kind of give it around to family members, as this is your mom, here in a little.
It's kind of a neat tradition, I think. It's kind of weird, but to give
cremation.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, just the dispersing of ashes.
Gotcha.
Whether you're getting it in a pouch, You know, I think Dave Grohl has a bullet around his neck with Lemmy's ashes. Someone does. Maybe it's not Dave Grohl. But...
I've been struggling with this, to be frank with you guys. My dad's ashes are just in my garage hanging out. I don't quite know what I'm going to do with them. And I had some questions for you, Rob. Like
Sure.
You know, going through this experience this year has been really interesting, but to say the least. But one question I have, and there's something I always think about when I pick up this box of my dad's ashes, is like, how much of this box is really my dad's ashes? I mean, like, it has to be a mix of like last 20 people that got roasted in there or something like that, right?
Well, yeah, there's going to be a very small percentage. And the reason is because of how the refractory of the crematory works. It is a brick refractory typically. And, you know, it's made of brick that is designed to be super heated, but it becomes porous. And so it can get small portions of cremated remains in the little cracks in the pores of the brick. And as you sweep out, you might pick up some of that from somebody prior to or even multiple times, you know, multiple cremations prior to. It just depends. But the majority, 99% of what you have there would be the cremated remains of your loved one.
Okay.
One thing I was going to tell you, which is actually something that's really kind of cool and kind of new, because you were talking about, I don't know what to do, or with Lyle talking about, you know, the hippie sacks. There's a brand new product that's out that's really, in my opinion, is actually really cool. It's called Parting Stone. Now, I'm not giving them a plug because I work for them or anything, but it is a really cool product. They actually take the cremated remains and they cast them into what's called solidified remains, which is in the shape of like a river stone. And you typically get back about 25 of these stones that you can put. They're all different sizes. You can place them all around the world. You can put them in water. I actually have a sample that they gave me 3 years ago, I think it was, and I put one of the little stones. It was from an animal that they experimented on. I put one in my fish tank at my office, and it's still there. You know, you can go by and see it anytime. And there's this little white stone that's just at the bottom of the tank. They're really kind of cool. I'd encourage you to look it up a little bit and see what parting stones are. They're kind of neat. You can carry them with you in your pocket, and you know, instead of having
just
like
be like a rock in the woods. How do you feel about that, though,
exactly.
Chris? Being, you know, maybe for you looking down the road, if you got turned into a rock, how would you feel about me putting you in a fish tank?
Oh, wow, that's brutal. Almost as brutal as mine.
I was on mute, but you heard that loud.
I'm sure you've heard enough of the show, you know, Rob, to know that
I've already gotten you guys to swear that you're going to roll me into a joint and smoke me when I die. So as long as you do that, I think I'd be okay chilling with your fish. Yeah, that's fine.
Well, that's an interesting question before we get back to the serious stuff. Rob, what's the craziest thing you've heard someone doing with someone else's ashes? Or did those stories even get back to you? I mean, they're kind of done with you at that point, I suppose.
Oh, goodness. I you know, we hear stories all the time. I was sitting at a funeral home one day, and the door opened up, and this guy comes walking in, and I mean, he is head to toe camouflage. He's got the clothes, the face paint, the gloves, everything. And he's about as big as me, which if you know me, I'm pretty good size.
You're a good size guy.
Yeah, he walks
Tall.
in, and well, both ways.
I haven't seen you since high school, so I can't know.
It's changed. But no, he walks in, and all he does is he hands me this urn in his hand, and he says, "This belongs to you." And he turns around and he walks out, and I'm like, what is this? So I started doing some research, and it turns out a year ago this person had died, and he had found this urn. He said he did come out and tell me that this urn just kind of floated up next to his boat while he was out duck hunting, which explained the camouflage. And
like that day.
Yeah. As I did the research, I found out that this person actually died almost a year to the day prior to. And when I called the family, I got a hold of the son, and the son said, "Whatever you do, don't tell my dad. Just, you know, I'll come down and take care of it." What had happened was the funeral home had released the urn to the dad, to the husband of the deceased, and he went up and, at the request of his wife, who was the deceased, had scattered her remains in the river. The drawback was he didn't scatter her; he just threw the whole urn in, and the urn had been bobbing up and down in the river for the last year.
Oh
Oh, dear.
And this guy just happened to be in the right place at the right time, and all of a
God bless
sudden
him.
he hears his dinging against this boat, and he kind of looks over the side of his boat, and here's this urn that's sitting there just bobbing in the water.
Clank, clank,
Yeah.
clank.
That's such a Big Lebowski moment.
I mean, just that kind of stuff, that strange kind of stuff happens all the time. We hear of stories all the time with urns, especially that somebody finds this nice vase at the Goodwill or something that they buy and they take home, and they open it up, and it's somebody's urn. And it's like,
Well, I guess if you put the urn on your shelf and you don't know what to do with it, much like Christopher, I mean, and you just die, or you for whatever reason, you just you got to get out of the property, then you just have this urn. I can see how that could end up in Goodwill, but is there some sort of identifying, how did this person bring it back to you? Just because it was an urn, or was there like a stamp that it came from you guys? How does that work?
So that's a great question. In Washington, which is where we are, there is something inside the urn. It's called a cremation tag. It's a little disc. It's about the size of a quarter. And on that disc, it's required that you have a cremation number, so you know what number this person is. And you have the name of the crematory that's stamped on that metal disc. And that disc is actually designed to go into the crematory with the individual to go through the cremation process and to be removed and put in the urn. That's the only real way you can be able to identify the cremated remains after the cremation has taken place. You can't really spread them out
It's
on
like
the
a
table and view
metal
'em.
tag that
Yeah, it's about the size of a quarter.
is in there while the body is being incinerated.
Yeah, and
Fascinating.
because of the fact that it's metal, it does not melt. The heat of the crematory doesn't get that hot.
Why does that weird me out more than the ashes themselves? It's like, this thing was in there while you were getting toasted. Not,
Yeah,
totally.
here, I can like scoop out a handful of your former self, but there's something.
Well, it was in there with him.
Yeah, it's weird.
When you think about it, though, people have metal pins and rods and that kind of stuff that's already in them as well. That's going through that cremation process. So as you're removing the remains from the crematory, you're removing all that metal that's there.
Oh, you don't
That
put
feeds
the
into
bolt
a-
in the urn?
No, not usually.
Okay.
That feeds into a question I got when I posted that we were going to have you on the show from one of my friends. Rachel asks, ask about pacemakers in the crematorium. I listened to one with a mortician. It was very interesting. Have you had any experience with that?
Pacemakers with cremation, only with cremation, have to be removed before the cremation.
Interesting.
Anything with a battery, a pacemaker, defibrillator, that all has to be removed
Was that your
because of
job?
the batteries. The batteries will explode.
Yeah. I was gonna
Do
say.
you do that?
What's that?
So that's part of your function too? Like you do that?
Yeah,
Oh.
you have to remove the pacemakers prior to placing the individual into the crematory.
Okay,
Now,
Rob, be honest. Is
Okay.
there a drawer with all this wacky shit in? Or does this have to be disposed in some sort of like Sharps type facility? Like, can you save this stuff, or does it have to be disposed of in a certain way?
When I first started years and years ago, yes, you could open a drawer and there's a whole drawer of pacemakers. There's a whole drawer of hip joints, knee joints, all that stuff. Nobody knew what to do with them.
Yeah.
And what's happening is there's a large percentage of recyclers that are out there that are now taking that metal and are able to recycle that metal and use the metal for other things. So they'll melt it down, they'll assay the metal, and what most of them are doing is providing a dollar amount back to the funeral home that's saying this is how much that metal was worth, in the recycling phase. And then the funeral homes are then taking that, whatever that amount is, and usually they're donating that in their name or somebody's name to a charity in the local area.
No shit.
They're not legally required to, but I'd say 99% of the crematories out there are doing that. They're donating that money because it's really not their money. It's
Well, that's
it's
really
from
cool, actually.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
lost and
So
found.
they're giving it back, but yeah,
Lost
that's
and
what's done.
found. Yeah, it's a way of paying it forward in an interesting way.
Well,
I mean, it's almost like... Yeah, go ahead, Lau.
Well, what was funny is like when I moved, you know when you get these quirky like fucking birthday cards and shit like that, and they have like a little battery in them. You open them up and they laugh at you or whatever. But that little battery is just only like a watch battery. I remember when I moved, I burnt a lot of paperwork. I had 25 years of pay stubs I fucking incinerated in my fireplace, and those batteries are only the size of watch batteries, and they have also the primer of a 22. When they go off, when they burn, they get to a certain temperature and they explode. And it's about the size of a 22 caliber. I knew because I had a couple of them pop off through the fucking. Jesus. Yes. Well, I had a front of the fireplace on, but they were bouncing around and ricocheting out of the living room and stuff. In fact, one of them hit me, kind of in the head. Yeah.
Oh, so, now you understand.
Good to know, folks.
And those batteries, well, I'm thinking in the heart pacemakers and stuff, they got to be a lot bigger than just a watch battery. So
they're bigger and designed to last a whole lot longer as well.
Oh,
but yeah, they will
just like a fucking car battery in the chest.
Serious damage.
The old ones were pretty much a car battery.
Is it true that?
Ahead,
is it true that a particularly obese person will cause like a grease fire as they're burning?
Yes, it can. That can definitely happen.
Well, makes sense. Higher fat content.
Yeah, fat is just like, not to be gross, but put a real fatty piece of meat in your stove and see what it does.
This is what I love about you, Rob. We talked about this at the beginning of the show. We all agree you're a consummate professional, but you will answer these questions. You're not afraid to answer these questions. You answer them in a straightforward way. This is the whole point. Like, we are curious about this. This is your job. But your demeanor is such that you understand how this is weird for the rest of us. Like, all of this is super fucking bizarre and gross and weird. And but I love that you just always have an answer for everything that we ask you. One thing I want to ask you about is, have there been any industry changes since COVID? Because I have to imagine that some of these cadavers coming, especially in the early days, we didn't know how long these things could possibly be. These things, I hate to say it that way, but this, if someone died from COVID, especially in the early era of the pandemic, was there different protocols? Because we didn't know how long these bodies could be potentially contagious.
Yeah, there was. It was. I likened it to, when I first got into this, we were kind of at the height of the AIDS pandemic as well, and so it was kind of the same thing for me of reliving that. We really didn't know what to do, so our goal was basically use as much precaution as possible. But what we found was that the big change was less services, but we still had about the same amount of people being cremated as we did being buried, but just less public services. We started seeing a lot more of the webcast services, more of the what we call direct services, meaning we just go out on our own and do the burial, and then the family would come later on afterwards and do their thing. But we saw a lot of that happen, and then as things started changing, as we started seeing more and more opportunity and more kind of information coming out, we started realizing that we could have viewing, we could have different things that families wanted, but it really did. I don't know if we saw an increase in the cremation numbers, but we definitely saw an increase in the amount of lack of a service, if that makes sense.
They were illegal for a while, right? Like, you couldn't even do it.
There was about a full week in Washington State where you could not have a funeral legally. You could not legally have a funeral. And then it kind of went to 5 immediate family members, and then eventually 10, and it started growing from there. But now it's right back to where it was pre-COVID. In fact, the governor's emergency orders are actually officially ending on, I think it's the 31st of this month.
Halloween.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Speaking of funerals on hold, I mean, I don't know if that was even a thing that was happening at COVID. Like, well, let's maybe wait until we can have everybody there. But I don't know if we've talked about this on the other show, but when the ground is frozen and somebody dies and they wanted to be buried, do the bodies just kind of stay in a locker until then, or is there equipment that can actually dig through frozen ground? Is that not even an issue?
It's not so much of an issue in Washington as much as it is in places like Montana, Alaska, that sort of thing. But yeah, there are grave warmers, they're called. They look like they're basically the size of a grave.
I remember that.
It's kind of got a dome top to it with a hole in it, and they essentially put a propane tank next to it with a little flamethrower and start burning it right into there, and it just warms the ground up and thaws it out enough where you can go in with a backhoe and dig the grave.
Yeah. I remember that now, that answer. It's like a grave warmer. So many good band names, so little time. Well, I know we talked to some degree about organ donors last time you were on the show, but as you know, this now hits way closer to home because Lyle is looking for a brand new kidney, and a kitty.
Yeah.
You may need both. Talk a little bit about the process of that all. Now, is all of that handled before you even get the bodies? Does any of that even concern you, or is that somebody else?
Well, organ donation is definitely such. There's so many different, I guess, segments you could say to organ donation. Putting the heart on your driver's license, saying you're an organ donor does not necessarily mean you will be an organ donor. It just primarily means that you've given permission for organ donation. The organ procurement agencies still have to receive permission from the family prior to doing any sort of organ donation. And depending on what the donation could be, I mean, there's so many different things that can be donated, from corneas, which is very common, cornea donation, to skin, long bone donation, to actual organ donation. There's just so many different opportunities that are out there. But depending on the type of donation will depend on when and where that procurement has to take place. If we're talking organ donation, that has to be done basically when a person is brain dead, but they're being kept alive on machines. They have to start that process immediately, versus, say, corneal donation can be done at the funeral home, 24 hours or so after death, and still have viable corneas that can be transplanted or used for research. So it really just depends on what it is. One thing I would caution anybody that is choosing for donation, I think it's a wonderful thing, by the way, don't get me wrong, but do your homework. Do your homework before you sign up and say, I want to donate after death, because there are basically two types of donation. There's for-profit and not-for-profit. A not-for-profit's going to be something like organ and tissue or medical school donations, where your remains go to, say, a medical school. You become a cadaver. They research you. They look at you for the next couple of years before they send you off to the crematory to be cremated, and then you're returned back to your family. There are for-profit donation centers out there that essentially pay for the deceased with the promise that whatever's left, we're going to cremate and give back to you. That's the one that you see in the news pretty often right now, because one, there's no regulation, or very, very little federal regulation to what they can and can't do. So if you donate to...
That seems crazy.
Oh, it's absolutely crazy. It's absolutely crazy. But you can donate to some of these places. And the biggest thing that happened here very recently, it was about a year or so ago, you guys might have even seen it. You might have even talked about it on the show. But there's this guy flipping through or scrolling through videos, TikTok or whatever. I think it was even previous to TikTok, but scrolling through videos online, and here he sees this person strapped to a chair, and all of a sudden the chair gets blown up. And what it was a company that had a government contract to make flak jackets for the military, and they were testing how these things work with roadside bombs. Well,
IEDs, yeah.
Yeah, what they ended up doing was they ended up going to one of these for-profit companies that are body donation companies and buying somebody's remains, putting them in a chair, and watching how this chair, watching what this jacket did. The sad part about it, the guy scrolling through the video, he's thinking, this is an interesting video. Then he realizes that it's his family member.
Oh.
Yeah.
And he's totally watching his family member being blown up.
He exploded.
Yeah.
That is really interesting. So what do you do?
definitely do your homework. If you say I want to be donated, more power to you. Just know where you're going to be donated. Is it a for-profit? Is it a not-for-profit program in which you're going to go? If you're fine with being blown up, hey, more power to you. Go for it.
I don't think 99% of the population, maybe even more, would ever guess that your body could just go to, say, the military experimenting with new bomb shielding vests.
Well, I
or
think
anything
we all,
other than going to somebody that needs it.
yeah,
Like,
I think we all have
that's
that
shocking.
ego. Well, I think we all have that ego inside, that signs, that little, heart on our driver's license that say we're going to save lives. We're going to save so many lives with my body parts, when I pass away. But as you heard, it's not all the same, really.
Well, I guess improving vest technology, certain bomb scenarios could technically lead to saving lives, but yeah, not necessarily what we signed up for. That's fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, should we get on to some listener questions? Because I'm looking at the clock, and I know you definitely want to stick around for some weird trivia.
Yeah, fire away.
We had some great questions. Kim asked, most challenging types of death to deal with concerning processing, or is it all the same? In other words, is there a certain type of, oh boy, this person died this way, this is going to be a doozy, versus any other thing? I mean, I'm sure you've seen it all at this point.
Well, that's the thing. I always caution myself for saying I've seen it all, because as soon as I do, something else comes along. It's just like, holy crap, what was that? Who would have thought?
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, after a while, it just kind of gets to a point where like, oh my gosh. But I still struggle with the kids. It's still a struggle for me when I'm working with families that have the loss of a child. And whether even depending on how that child died, there's definitely a different feeling from a child that has died from sickness versus a child that maybe was murdered or killed in a car accident or something like that.
Violent.
So,
yep.
So there's definitely some difficulty there. I would say that's probably the biggest one.
Yeah. Sarah asks, I've heard stories about people preserving tattoos of loved ones. Have you ever had to help with that, or have you seen any tattoos that stood out or tattoo placement that were eyebrow-raising? So a couple questions in one. You do, I mean, in terms of like intimacy, is there anything more personal than our own person? And I'm imagining at some point we are naked as we came into this world, and you're there, we're on the slab, and you see everything. So, yeah, people preserving tattoos. Is that something that's come up?
It is something that is out there now. It is something that has come up in Washington. We've done some research on it with the state, with the Department of Licensing, and basically what the ruling so far is in Washington, it's actually not something that's legally able to be done in Washington, because it involves the removal of the skin to preserve that tattoo. The state looks at that as skin is the biggest organ of the body, and the law is very clear. You cannot separate organs for different forms of disposition. It's kind of all or none. Okay. So you can't purposely do that.
If somebody put that in their will or something, is that something? Could they bequeath their tattoos to their loved ones?
Well, I mean,
they
imagine.
They can. It's just, you're going to be hard pressed to find somebody.
Yeah. You're getting the full package, man. Could you imagine that, Ron? Oh, yeah, I want my ex-wife's heart shoulder tattoo. And they
paid for that tattoo. It's mine.
They literally give you the whole skin.
You just get it all
of your ex-wife.
Like, you know what? I got scissors. I'll take care of this. The rest I'll fry up in a little olive oil, a little pepper and salt.
They don't tell you and just mail it to you. And you open up your package, you're like, what in the hell? What is this?
On Valentine's Day. Well, I'm curious if you have an answer to the second part of that question. Have you just seen any tattoos? Again, seeing us all naked as jaybirds, dead as a doornail on a slab. Have you seen any tattoos? It's like, wow, I wonder how many people knew about that one.
Yeah, I have. And I'm going to change the names on this just to protect the innocent, so to speak. But one time, this was years and years ago, right after I got out of mortuary school, I was working in a prep room. And part of the identification process prior to cremation is you need to make a positive identification. One of the ways to do that is through either viewing or looking for scars, marks, or tattoos.
Yeah.
Tattoos are a great way to identify somebody. And I got this call from the funeral director. He was kind of laughing, but he was also kind of embarrassed to ask. He said, this person has a tattoo, I'm told. I asked about it, and most of the family said, oh, no, our loved one would never have a tattoo. They're too old for that. And as he walked out the door, one of the kids came up and said, well, they do have a tattoo, and here's what it says, and here's where it's at. And so he called and asked if I could locate this. So I went and pulled the person out of the refrigeration unit and pulled the sheet back, and sure enough, there was a tattoo going across the lower abdominal part of the individual with an arrow pointing down, and you could make out the words that said, "This pussy belongs to." And then it had a person's name.
Sure.
It was like, oh my god, this is like a 90-some-year-old individual, and I'm like,
No
oh,
shit.
Oh my God, was it Ron? Tell me it was Ron.
It was Ron.
Ron Evans.
Oh, is that what happened to Virginia? We only had 2
crazy
sweet
part
weeks
about it-
together.
Yeah, the crazy part about it was this was something that was obviously done years and years ago, well before this individual was married, and so it wasn't the person that they spent their
So they
life
lived
with.
that.
He had to go
So
down on
every
her.
time he's fucking her,
See
he's like
Ron's
reminded.
name every fucking time he went down
Not
on his
even
wife.
mine.
He's like, his 90-year-old
I
pussy
paid for it all the time.
doesn't belong to me. It says right here.
Oh, that's
So
great.
yeah, there are some definitely weird stuff that you see, for sure.
Well, that was a good question, Sarah. I'm going to combine these next two in the interest of time. Michelle asked, what was the strangest thing someone requested to be buried with? And Mark asked, can people be buried with their pets? I think that could be answered probably in one fell swoop. Strange thing anyone requested to be buried with? And can you be buried with a pet? Obviously,
Buried with a
you want
pet?
that pet to be dead.
Yeah. That's what I told my parents. I said, when I die, if I do die,
If.
soon,
Mhm.
you know where my dog is. He's in a little box, and just throw him in my box.
Sure.
And then we're all good. You know what I mean? We're both cremated at that time, so
Yeah.
it's like, whatever.
Technically, in the state of Washington, burial is considered the disposition, not cremation. The burial is. So if a person is buried in a casket, they're not supposed to be buried with pets because you're not supposed to have animals and pets in the same cemetery. However,
Oh, interesting.
if you're cremated, the cremation is actually considered the disposition. So you can be cremated, have your cremated remains put with your pet, and then from that point, take the urn down to a cemetery or whatever and bury the urn, because that's not considered burial. The disposition's already been done. That's the cremation part of it. So
Gotcha.
Loophole.
it's a loophole. Yep, absolutely. But I do have a story about that as well. My old neighbor, his wife passed away, and when I went to her house to pick her up, their little ankle biter dog was doing just that. He was nipping at my ankles the entire time. Later on, we went to the funeral, or we were having the funeral, and the husband showed up a couple hours extra early for the funeral and asked if he could place something in the urn with his wife. And I said, yeah, whatever. We'll open the urn up and no problem. And he had actually gone down that day, put the dog to sleep, had it cremated, and then brought the cremated remains back to place in the urn with his
see,
wife. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, as he handed it to me, I'm like, that's the dog that was just biting me a couple days ago?
The one that
That's
was
messed up.
full of life and energy.
Yeah.
Yikes.
Nice young puppy. No, he was actually an old dog. Long in the tooth dog.
Oh, yikes. Well, God, I don't know, man. That's to each their own, I suppose. But
People do weird stuff.
did you have anything separate? Michelle's question, strangest thing anyone's requested to be buried with? Obviously not animals or probably any other living thing, but item-wise.
I've seen all sorts of stuff that people put with individuals. One in particular that I'm thinking of was we buried a guy. He had it was $400 or $500 golf club in his in his casket with him that was just being buried. We've seen people that I've seen people that have placed, all sorts of illicit drugs and alcohol and everything from magazines and it's just anything that people want to put in there. It's done. It's kind of crazy when you think about what people try to sneak in or just deliberately put in front of everybody.
Jack Daniels. It's such a personal thing, It's like it's like a personal tribute. Could mean absolutely nothing to anybody else. It's just like an inside thing. Yeah, I get that.
Well, my aunt, when my grandmother passed away, I mean, she was embalmed and whatnot, and during her ceremonial funeral, before they're getting ready to shut the coffin, and at the end of it, she walked up and put a joint, I think, in her hand. Or like close by, like or maybe on her chest, and then put her hand over her chest or whatever. But
yeah, I put a guitar pick in Jason's pocket. You might remember to this day. There's a guitar pick, 6 feet. Is it 6 feet under or 10 feet under, Rob? What's the standard there?
We have to ask Creed.
I'm 6 feet from the edge, or is it 10 feet? Yeah.
Actually, the footage, the depth footage is really not the factor. It's how much ground is above the casket. 6 foot has always been sort of the old wives' tale. You got to go 6 feet deep. But really, what the law says is how much ground is in between the top of the casket and the surface of the ground. And they're looking at just over 18 inches primarily for that.
Whoa.
So yeah, so there's not a lot of difference. I've seen some graves that you're looking at them going, there's no way there's even going to be 18 inches in between there. And I've seen some that you just don't even want to get near because it looks like it's 20 feet deep. But, it just depends on how well they dig.
Wow. Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, finally, Shelby has a great question. She says, I'd like to know what the most common strange request is by family members of the deceased, or for the deceased maybe. And is there something you wouldn't think would be asked that is asked maybe a little too often? So let's take that bit by bit. What's a strange request you get from family members? Imagine that's got to be all over the map.
It is, but I've actually had a couple of phone calls recently with the request of, can I have my loved one's head back after the cremation? Can you cremate the person and have the head? Can I have the skull back?
Seems reasonable.
Like, yeah, why not? The answer is no, but
Sure.
yeah, that's been and that's most recent. I mean, I just had that question asked me again maybe a week and a half ago.
Do they start with like, this is going to be an odd request, or they just come out and be like, can I get my dad's head back, or what?
Yeah, it's crazy. It's just,
to me, like a question like that would be like, hey, can I have Elvis, maybe an impersonator, come in and like do the whole part of the funeral or something like that, something kooky. Not like,
can I have the skull? That is a surprise to me. Yeah. But why couldn't they get the skull, Rob?
Because this body part, like.
Well, yeah, it's part of the
biohazard. What is the actual, like, why couldn't they?
Well, the last person that asked me that was basically, can you remove the skull prior to the cremation and just let me keep the head?
Oh, full on
the skull,
head,
but the actual head, yeah. And I was like, no, we can't.
I hope that person
do that.
is now on a list.
If not, should be
he's
on
on
the list.
some sort of list for asking that question.
Yeah.
No, that's not right.
But after cremation, or even alkaline hydrolysis, which is called water cremation or aquamation, those, all that's left is the skeletal remains, and they get pulverized and returned back. So I guess in a sense, if you're giving back the cremated remains or the alkaline, the aquamated remains, they're getting back the skull, just not in that particular original shape.
Yeah, like the original
and certainly
form.
not as sturdy, because the cremation and the water cremation both will make the bone material extremely brittle.
Wow. No Hamlet for them.
Asked you if they could have the head, not the skull, not the treated, burnt, or cleaned skull.
Yeah, no, just cut the thing off and get it back, and then cremate the remains.
Yeah, I think what he's talking about is literally the head, muscle, skin.
Well, that's
Basically
perfect
the
for
head.
tonight's show. Well, thanks for the questions, everybody. Those are great questions. And Rob, you're always welcome back anytime. Obviously, we're going to keep you on to do some weird trivia, but I want to give you a chance before I forget to plug your own podcast, which is industry specific. So what is your podcast?
Yeah, it is. Actually, this podcast, I got to tell you, came about after being on Tales from the Space Pod.
Oh, man.
So you guys kind of helped stir that on.
Probably have more listeners than we do, like every other podcast that came from our podcast.
Probably right.
But it's called Member Talks. It's by Washington State Funeral Directors Association. And when I became the executive director for WSFDA, or Washington State Funeral Directors Association, I had discovered that we had a YouTube page, but we didn't have anything on the YouTube page. It was just a blank YouTube page. And so we started out. I went to our board and I said, hey, why don't we we're kind of toying with this thing called Zoom for our board meetings. This was pre-COVID. I said, we're kind of toying with this. Why don't we do this thing? We'll call it 5-Minute Member Talks. Actually, the original title I told them was going to be 5 Minutes with Your Member, but I didn't think that would go over that well.
It would with our audience, as you know.
So we called it 5-Minute Member Talks. And what we found was, we were talking with members of our association, and those 5 minutes ended up being 40 minutes. And, they were just being put onto YouTube. And we ended up with about 80 different videos on YouTube before we started getting requests. Can't you put this onto a podcast? Because we like to listen to it while we're embalming, while we're driving down the road, while we're doing all this other stuff. We can't sit in front of a computer and watch it.
Mm-hmm.
And
fucking,
so
is that what you said, Chris? Why we're fucking?
No,
You can never know. I'm going to say that. You can never know. Sorry, I didn't mean.
But so that's what we did, and we do a weekly, just a weekly little show called Member Talks by WSFDA. We've got about 100, and I think we're at about 140 now episodes on that.
Oh, nice job!
And it's really kind of grown to just like you said, industry specific. We talk to different vendors, we talk to different suppliers, we talk to different funeral people. We've brought pastors on to talk about how their church does a funeral. It's really just kind of open to any kind of conversation about funerals. One of our guests is kind of surprising. We shared a guest, I will say.
Yeah.
And it worked out kind of funny with that as well. I actually met this gentleman. His name's Michael Warfield, who's been on How Bizarre before.
He's a good friend of mine, yeah.
Yeah, I met him at a funeral home in Seattle that I was killing time, and just went into the funeral home to talk with them, and because I knew the manager. I introduced myself to him, and as I was going to the next funeral home across town, my friend called me and said, do you know anything about this? It's like space cast something. Couldn't figure it out.
Tales from Cat's Butt?
What?
Well, we don't know.
Yeah. And so I said, Tales from the Space Pod? And she goes, yeah, that's it. Yeah, this guy you just met, he heard you on that show, and
Crazy.
He wants to meet you. And I was like, wow, okay. So we actually had him on our show as well. And then most recently, you guys had him as well.
Yeah, I listened to that
Good
episode.
guy.
It was great. It was a great conversation. And I appreciate the shout out. So I needed to give you a shout out. And without further ado, I believe it's time. Should I fire up the theme song? Do we need a break, anybody? Or are we going right into this?
You have it ready, prepped? What's happening?
Listen, I'm ahead of the game here. I got to fight this post-COVID fog. Are we ready? I'm going to play it. Let's do it.
I'm fucking ready.
Me too.
It's Weird Trivia with Christopher F. Hahn.
You guys can't hear it. I just realized.
Man from Florida who thinks square shit in nature.
Shit in nature.
He started on the goddamn brown Harry. It's Weird Trivia and Christopher Fine.
All right, the Halloween Around the Campfire episode version of Weird Trivia. I'm somehow more afraid than I normally am. Now, Rob, did you play this with us last time you were on the show? Is this your first time?
No, it's my first time.
Oh, I'm excited.
Yeah, I missed out the last time.
Okay. Well, there's no time like the present. I'm ready. I have 4 questions for y'all. Pretty fun ones here. Nothing too spooky, but still pretty fun. We'll get right into this. We're going to go traditional order with our guest at the rear. So Ron, John Mark Lyle, and then Rob, The Undertaker. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Taking it in the under.
Mm-hmm. Question 1, guys. In Japan, 75% of the male population does this on a regular basis. 75%. Is it A, wears eyeliner?
75%, okay.
B, gives all their money to their wives and lives off a monthly allowance?
That sounds about right.
Huh.
Is it C, sleep with anime-themed sheets and or pillowcases?
Okay.
Or is it D, gets up at 3 a.m. every day to prepare family breakfast?
3 a.m. Oh, this is fucking tough and random.
Mm-hmm.
Quick answer recap.
Yeah. Wears eyeliner, gives all their money to their wives and gets an allowance, sleeps with anime-themed sheets or pillowcases, or gets up at 3 a.m. to prepare family breakfast.
Well, the only thing that I feel... Oh, we going with me first, yeah. The only thing I feel like you made up is the anime sheets one. But Japan, man, that's a culture that looks fucking crazy to me. And we've talked about... Japan is the Florida of the world in many ways, because it's like literally anything. If you start with a man in Japan, it kind of anything goes. But I'm interested in the gives their wife all their money and accepts an allowance. I'm gonna save the reason I'm going behind that. It's a guess, but I have a philosophy behind it that I won't share until everyone else's answer.
Okay. I'll put you down for a B. John Mark.
I think it's B.
I'm gonna go with B as well. The allowance.
Okay. That'd be good.
Never bad company.
Lyle. Yeah, that's true.
You know, the first time I heard it, I thought that was absolutely it. If you listen back, it probably sounds just like that. But once you mentioned the whole breakfast, I think that might be it.
3 a.m. breakfast.
Well, because I think most of those, people work. I'm not even saying like sex or gender or whatnot. Work, predominantly a lot harder than most people do, like in the United States. So to wake up at 3,
they also seem to be a bit more ceremonious in a lot of things that they do.
Kind of like a provider deal thing. Maybe breakfast is like the most important meal of the day. I don't know. I like it. It might take, you could easily.
I like it.
I like it. I like it a lot.
Breakfast.
Lila. And I would think, hey, if you're taking your time and making it special, it could take 2 hours. And to get from 5 o'clock.
Absolutely. Breakfast, I feel like, is often, to make a really good breakfast, especially to get them taters right, yeah, it takes some time.
Or your eggs. You cook your eggs real slow so you don't burn them. But, whatever you're making, it doesn't matter. It usually could take up to an hour, maybe an hour and a half on the long. But that only leaves you 5 o'clock in the morning, so you get on your train, and then you're at work at 6. Get home at 8, Who knows? They might not even get, a dinner. Maybe breakfast is the biggest dinner they get.
Maybe their dinner.
Who knows?
Yeah,
but
they're all together.
I'm going with that.
Not a bad analyze.
Not bad at
Rob,
all.
what you feeling?
Lyle, your train sounds like something from the Jetsons, man.
His wife
3
Judy.
a.m. breakfast.
I like bacon and eggs.
So I gotta admit, I don't know hardly anything about the Japanese culture. It seems like the sheets and the eyeliner might be more of a younger generation to me that would probably go with that. I like the idea of the breakfast, but even though I don't know much about the Japanese culture, I know that every culture believes that the happy wife is a happy life. And so I'm going with give all your money to her and then live on what she gives you back.
The allowance.
Love it.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you why I went with that answer. I remember us looking at a study not that long ago. I might even talked about it on the podcast where we were talking about specific sex habits of each country. And one thing that was huge in Japan was male to woman submissiveness, like cuckolding or domination over women. And
Kenneling.
I think reverse kenneling, we call it. I think in a funny way that could kind of line up with that. Just straight up given. Yeah. Rob's definition is way more, I think, diplomatic. Where it's just like, yeah, keep the wife happy, and I think we can all agree that that's a good idea.
That's pretty scientific.
I'm tying it into sex a little bit, maybe. But
Got a lot of truth.
that was my why I went with it.
All right. Question 2. This actor was initially considered for the role of Edward Scissorhands before Johnny Depp took it. But the actor in question asked too many odd questions about the character, like, how does he go to the bathroom? And how does he eat a meal? And he didn't make the cut.
He's just trying to find his motivation.
Yeah. Who was this actor that was nearly Edward Scissorhands? Is it Leonardo DiCaprio, Brad Pitt, Sean Penn, or Tom Cruise?
God, for some reason, I was expecting Crispin Glover. Okay. I feel like Leo might have been a little kid at that point. I'm trying to think of the timing here. He would have been young, but so was Johnny. Brad Pitt. Again, I'm trying to think in that era. I don't know if he had established himself enough to ask those kinds of questions, but I can tell you who had, and who is known for being difficult in one way or another, and that is absolutely Sean Penn. I can't remember the fourth. Oh, Tom Cruise. Boy. Interesting. He had definitely made an appearance at that point, right?
Imagine
that was definitely post Top Gun.
Yeah.
Boy,
Wasn't that like...
Boy, that's tough. Go ahead, Lyle.
Well, I'm just imagining jumping on Oprah's couch and saying, I'm going to be in a movie with scissors on my hands.
Take those old scissors off my hands.
The shelf.
I'll cut your hedges in the... Okay. Fuck.
I think a gothic Tom Cruise would probably work pretty well.
I am torn between Tom and Sean,
I
but
feel
I'm gonna go with
the need for scissor sleeves.
Scissor sleeve. Would you like a haircut?
I'm gonna go with Sean, just by a scissor. I think that it's down between those two, but yeah, I can't imagine. I mean, that almost most roles that Johnny Depp has done, it's really hard to imagine anybody else in them. But it's really hard to imagine a Tom Cruise, Edward Scissorhands,
God, you know what's so weird?
Edward Middletooth.
Go ahead, John Mark. I'll tell you what's weird.
I have no basis for this whatsoever because like most of these seem like I don't know. I just have no idea, but I'm just going to go with Brad Pitt.
Brad Pitt.
Okay.
You know what seems weird is like for Johnny Depp, the way he is now is kind of like, you remember there's always been like one scuffed kid you went to school with that kind of looked like, like him. Like, you kind of look like Johnny Depp a little bit, if you weren't scuffed. Like, I don't know, crazy, like a crazy eye. You got a lazy eye. Okay. Or maybe the dude's, whatever. He was really close to looking like him, but not really.
Like a broke version.
Yeah, like a broke version.
Dude, I totally screwed it. Scuffed Angelina Jolie the other night.
A Johnny Depp from like if you ordered him off of Wish or something like that.
Yeah.
Like a Denton scratch.
Johnny Derp.
And unfortunately, Johnny Derp. And unfortunately, nowadays he almost looks like a post version of himself. He looks really rough.
Well, we all age. I mean, come on, give the guy a break.
We do,
but
like
60 and a life of indulgence. He was beautiful for more years than most of us will ever be.
This is true. This I want to say is around the time of the Viper Room, right? When we're all having the tragedy
I'm
with
having a hard time remembering exactly when Edward Scissorhands came out. It could be late 80s, could be early 90s, could be midnight.
I want to say it was before it. I want to say it was before it. To be honest with you,
the Viper Room.
Like the Viper Room.
I feel like it probably was before.
Kid died.
Yeah, River Phoenix.
And they all kind of hung out together. But for somebody questioning so much, and I kind of want to go with John Mark and go with Brad Pitt.
Interesting.
All right. Put you down for Brad Pitt here too. Rob,
It's a tough one. I'm kind of following Ron's lead of trying to time this thing out of when it took place or when it came out, and it doesn't seem like to me Leonardo DiCaprio would be old enough to be in that.
No, he'd be like a child.
Yeah, I kind of like the idea of Brad Pitt because although he would be of age, I don't recall him being in a whole lot of stuff leading up to something like that.
The it was Dracula. He was in Dracula during that time period.
No,
that's
Keanu
wasn't
Reeves.
he?
Dracula. You're thinking
He
of
wasn't in that.
That was
Keanu
with Tom
Reeves.
Cruise.
you're thinking of Interview with the Vampire.
Interview with the
Oh.
Vampire. That's what I was
there you
thinking.
go.
With
That
Tom
was, that was
Cruise.
later.
Okay.
I think.
I
I'm
think
really
it's
having
like
a hard
at that
time with
time.
when I feel like Edward Scissorhands was Johnny Depp's first big movie. I could be wrong. I mean, I know he was in Nightmare on Elm Street. I know he was in
90210 or not? That was what was that? The cop show when he was a.
Well, yeah,
Hill
he
Street
was
Blues?
in,
No,
21
21 Jump
21
Street.
Jump
That
Street.
was way before that.
No, I know that. I'm just saying.
Wasn't he in?
I think it was just a couple years before Edward Scissorhands.
Wasn't he in What's Eating Gilbert Grape with Leonardo DiCaprio?
Yes.
Mhm.
Yes.
Oh, you're right. Yeah, and Leo was.
I believe that was
definitely younger.
afterwards, though.
Yeah. This is so funny. We can't.
Yeah.
None of us can nail down when the fuck. I think it was late '80s that Edward Scissorhands
I mean,
came out.
I
but
could go. We could
maybe
go on
1990?
IMDb, but that would like ruin the whole.
Yeah, let's not. We'll look it up, of course, but not now.
All right, I'm going to go with just a complete shot in the dark. I'm going to say Tom Cruise. I think he was around then, but I think he was probably young enough and maybe cocky enough to be asking questions like that,
Yeah.
trying to figure it out.
You're right.
So-
I looked it up, 1990. So I think that was his first big movie, Johnny Depp.
Okay. Question 3 is about ladybugs. We all know them. We all love them. Despite their name, there are male ladybugs as well. And perhaps they are not the brightest of the sexes of the insects here.
That
Because
computes.
male ladybugs will often do this. Is it A? Fall asleep mid-flight and plummet to their death.
Narco ladybug.
Wait, do me a favor, Ron, and do your best impersonation of a ladybug going through each one of these things.
I'ma fuck me so much ladybug pussy tonight.
You're crazy.
All right.
I feel like he was
B.
close to the ground in my story, but you.
Sure. B will often try to fight the reflection of themselves in mirrors, glass, and water.
Fuck you looking at, bitch. I picture it like putting its wings up like geese do. You know, when you walk by a bunch of geese in the park, they're like a bunch of douchebag bros like, hey, bro, what the fuck? Let's do this. What's up, bro? What's up? What's good?
Your antennas kind of come out a little bit. But then you go you're like, what the fuck, bro? Against the mirror, and then you fall down because you got scared. And then you're looking into the water, and you're like, what the fuck, bro? You guys.
That's right. You run away.
Yeah, that's right,
surrounded me,
bitch.
motherfucker?
Oh, you're coming back for more? Well, so am I.
Yeah, I can do this all day.
You think you can go toe to toe with me? Okay, so far you have, but
All right, well, keep this going, Ron, because I think it's going to pay off. Is it C? Will cover themselves in their own poop and play sick to try to get out of doing daily chores.
yeah, I don't want to fucking go out. Mow the lawn. You know what?
Ladybug.
I can't. Yeah.
Scoopity scoop, coverity cover. It's like, can't do it. Buried
Look
in
at me.
shit. Wait,
Smell me.
what's the fucking logic here? They cover their, like they bury themselves like they can't be found?
They think they make themselves appear sickly.
Oh, well, you can't ask John to go do it. He's covered in shit.
Yeah, man, he's not doing
obviously-
great. Look at him.
He's not only
Obviously
under the
doing
weather, he's
shitty.
under the shit. Yeah. Get buried to mow the lawn. Okay. What
all right,
chores
or
do
is-
ladybugs have?
Well, routine. They have routine.
They have
That-
to. They must.
Fly around.
Like
So.
We all
any,
have
like
our-
any species. Yeah.
Lots in life.
Or is it D? They will mate with a dead female ladybug for hours until they realize something's not quite right.
Oh, yeah, that's right, baby. I'm doing this so good, you're fucking stunned.
Yeah, oh my god.
Can't even move it. honey. Tap, 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 honey. Oh,
almost there.
Jesus Christ. I'm a monster. And yet,
With wings.
I'm going to finish. I can feel bad in about 30 seconds.
So many regrets. So many regrets.
I almost feel like you've done this before, Ron.
The role I was born to play. I worked through a lot of ladybug-related scenarios in my head. Yeah.
Again, real fast for a recap, because fuck me. Ladybugs, the male species, the male sex of ladybugs will do one of these things. Fall asleep mid-flight, plummet to their death, try to fight their own reflection, will cover themselves in poop to get out of doing work, or mate with dead female ladybugs and not realize it till about 2 hours in.
I have to look at this from your perspective. What would tickle Christopher F. Hart in terms of a ladybug-related story? And I am torn between fucking the dead, which is perfect for our guest tonight. No, let me rephrase.
Wow. Yes, yes, please.
I'm not accusing Rob of fucking the dead. But the
I'm
dead...
offended for Rob.
Anyway, he hung up a half hour ago.
Yeah, he's like, I'm out.
I'm torn between Ladybug and the Dead or covering oneself with poop to get out of a chore. I think it's probably D, but I'm going to go with the brown herring and saying that he's covering himself. Wait a minute. That's not dumb. That's actually clever. The question is,
Put that one in your
ladybugs.
repertoire.
You're alluding in that question. Read the question one more time.
The question?
Yes.
Okay. Male ladybugs will often do this.
Oh, I
that
thought you
was the
prefaced
question.
it with something that I thought made them seem dumb.
Well, yeah, I mean, they're not very bright. None of these things are particularly...
Covering
signs
yourself
of
with shit to get out of
intelligence.
chores is something I'm going to try. I'm going to call in shit covered one of these days. I think I talked myself into D. Fucking the dead.
You're
And
going with fucking the dead.
not realizing it. And probably finishing even after they realize because, well, I'm already in.
Oh no.
This is weird and gross, and I've already committed a sin.
You're like, oh my god, the regret's still real, just like there's a lot.
Oh, the regrets I'm going to have in about 10, 9, 8. Damn it. All right.
John Mark.
Yeah, so we got a brown herring and a pink herring.
It might be gray at that point.
Yeah, it's possible. So I'm torn between the mirror fights
That's a good one.
and the necrophilia. But I'm gonna go.
That's one normally is.
Do I do the mirror?
Mirror fights or necrophilia? Let's go with D.
Fight the fucking.
Yep.
I'm a firm believer of picking up your shit. I don't know, smearing it on yourself. I can't do work. Look at me, I'm
That'll
covered
work.
in poo. Why would
That
you
is
want me
a
to do anything?
really interesting answer if you made that up. I suppose all these are, but that is I almost went with that one.
Thank you,
Yeah.
exhaustion.
Yeah, right. Thanks,
Oh.
no sleep for 5
I
weeks.
make a very mediocre living off of exhaustion.
Okay, Rob.
Yeah, gosh, I think the first one is, I think you'd be seeing ladybugs just falling out of the sky all the time. If you're driving around or walking around, you just dropping dead. The other thing about ladybugs that I've kind of figured out is when they land on you and you go to flick them or whatever, they always crap on you, and it's a kind of a yellow thing. Which to me would think like if you saw a bunch of yellow ladybugs, that might be more representative. But
All right.
the other thing though, that the necrophilia one was kind of interesting, only because I grew up on an orchard in Wenatchee, and we had a ton of these black and red box elder bugs, and if you ever watch those guys mate, they're always like butt to butt, and one of them's always trying to fly away and drag the other one, so it kind of looked like they had some
Weird.
necrophilia going on. Did you ever have that?
That's kind of like tug of
I've never
war,
seen
right?
that.
But
Yeah, it was kind of like it was
sexual.
kind of fun to was kind of fun to actually sit and watch them try to fly away from each other, and one always got drugged behind. I got to go with the
Rob the Undertaker liked
water.
to sit and watch bugs fuck, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah,
I mean,
well,
that's
you
what
got to have
you
goals
heard it
in
here
life.
He said it was in his youth.
Us to us.
Commence! Commence!
Someone out there will
Is
get
that the
that.
Star Trek?
Finally, something Ron can relate to: voyeurism.
I'm gonna sit and watch these two quote unquote bugs fuck. What? It's for science.
Yeah, no, I think it's the water reflection.
Oh, the fighting.
I think they get I think they're
Water
trying to
fighting.
fight themselves.
Interesting.
Okay.
I cannot wait to get these answers.
Lyle, can you remind me what you went with, sir?
The poo.
That's right. Okay, question 4. Lastly, this little gem came across my desk the other day, and boy, is it a gem. Many years ago, this notorious musician, who famously would not pose in photographs for much during their career, was asked by their bodyguard, who was writing a book about self-defense, if they would pose in photos with them in it. So to this motherfucking day, you can find this like 50-page self-defense book that's just every other page is the bodyguard and this person posing in like karate forms. It's fucking great. Various fighting positions, etc. Who was this person? Ooh, hello.
Sorry, a little whiskey.
And I do, of course, have a photo to share with everyone. Was it A, Alanis Morissette? Was it B, Prince? Why do you want to see it?
My
God.
God.
Roundhouse you. I'm gonna get
Is it
like-
C? Is it C, Stevie Nicks?
Just like a one-leg sweep, bring you down and make you crying. Ouch, baby, ouch.
ow.
Just say ouch.
You want to see it, don't you? Or is it D, Eddie fucking Money?
Oh, God.
Well, now see, this is bullshit because you sent a screenshot to us a few days ago with, oh, I just got an alert for some Eddie Money news. But that could have been the ultimate herring. Like, I'm gonna make Ron think that I just got a
Psych you
piece
out.
of Eddie Money news to include in this
head.
program. And all the while, it's Stevie Nicks doing kung fu.
Got 2 tickets to self-defense.
Won't you earn your black belt or get ass kicked? Fuck it. I feel like this is the
Go what's in your
this is
what's
the
in your
kung
heart.
fu
Ron.
herring right here. This is the
the time.
unfair kung fu herring.
Time to-
Here's the thing. I'm gonna go with Eddie Money. But if you sent a fucking screenshot of an Eddie Money, this is the last question. So if you sent a screenshot of Eddie Money related news to throw me off, I think everyone listening at home is going to call bullshit on that. And I'm going to call your shit. I'm going to say 2 tickets to sweep the knee. Okay, yes. Eddie Money all the way.
Okay.
And I will lose every time on that hill because I'm not always going to go with Eddie Money. I
You
haven't.
don't always go. Yeah.
But yeah, 2 tickets to see it through.
All right. John Mark.
Can you just read the question again real quick? I
Sure.
wasn't quite sure I understood that.
This notorious musician, who famously would not pose in photographs for much of their career, was asked by their bodyguard, who was writing a book about self-defense, to pose in photos for it. So to this day, you can find this book. It's like 50 pages, littered with photos of this person doing in various like martial arts poses and all sorts of fun things. Who was it? Alanis Morissette, Prince, Stevie Nicks, or Eddie fucking Money?
And it's funny because we've seen plenty of photos of all these people, but did they pose for them? How many of these were posed? You gotta
really,
pose
though?
for some of them. It's an interesting question.
I don't know. I'm going with Prince.
Yeah,
Ooh.
he was a kooky dude with lots of kooky
yeah.
rules.
Yeah.
Posing for a
Let's see
photo
it.
was probably something that he absolutely was picky about. I do feel like he was into martial arts now that I think about it, but
Wow.
I think I'm going to see you crying in the purple rain. Purple
I
rain.
only wanna see you losing to my karate kick in the purple Purple belt.
Purple belt ring, purple belt ring.
Got my purple belt. Purple belt.
Oh man,
Are you going with Prince?
I was hoping we were gonna kumbaya that thing. Holy crap! I'm not gonna go with that though. I strangely enough, I'm gonna say, I'm a bitch. I'm a mother. I'm a lover. I don't know how the song is.
No,
Different artist.
Alanis
Go ahead.
Alanis Morissette.
You're thinking about You Ought to
I'm
Know.
a bird. I don't know.
That's Meredith Brooks or whatever.
Paula Cole.
She doesn't seem to be in a lot of photos.
Yeah, that wasn't
besides-
Alanis Morissette.
Meredith Brooks is who you're thinking of.
John, Lyle,
well.
before you answer, you should know who Alanis Morissette is. She wasn't I'm a bitch. She was you ought to know.
Oh, that's what it is.
I'm a bitch.
Or ironic, you know. And isn't it ironic? It's like
I know what you're saying.
rain.
Okay.
That was pretty ironic.
It's like a blackbird on your...
When all you deserve is brown.
Yeah. She wasn't in a whole lot of pictures. You know, she wasn't she got her shit like robbed up at the gorge.
talked about
when-
that.
Who wanted her shit?
Someone stole her purse.
That was a purse. It was a purse
Fucking
with a
go-
book in it or something like
Yeah,
that.
it had
She
the
didn't-
lyrics. and
Ladybug.
stuff. Yeah, I remember
And
that.
her
Her diary.
fucking martial arts lessons too.
It could have been martial arts lessons. That's what I'm saying. You don't know. She seems to me like... It seems to me like I've seen her in like some type of a robe. Maybe it might be from my... No, I don't remember. But I've got it. That's what I'm going with.
I got 2 minutes to sweep the lake. I'm sorry, but that's just
Yeah.
confirming that I made the right choice here. What are you feeling, Rob?
So it doesn't sound like anybody picked Stevie Nicks yet. I think it's like we've got everybody else. So I'm totally
Make it a-
lost. I'm just going to go Stevie Nicks.
There we
Playing
go.
a Family game.
Everybody play
Somebody's
the
going to get a
field.
point.
All right,
Yeah.
let's go over the
You're
answers here. I think we have had an interesting game for at bare minimum.
Sure feels like it.
Question 1: In Japan, 75% of the male population, on the regular, will give all their money to their wives and live off a monthly allowance.
Shot,
Yeah.
that's what it was. Too.
On John, Mark, and
Most of
Rob,
us.
starting off strong with a point.
Okay.
Question 2: this actor was initially considered for the role of Edward Scissorhands before Johnny Depp landed it, but the actor in question kept asking too many strange questions like, how's he gonna go pee and how does he eat a meal? And we're talking about Tom fucking Cruise.
Oh, goddamn.
Yeah, Ronster coming in
Go,
with a point
Rob.
now.
No, I didn't go with
yeah.
Tom Cruise. Rob.
Oh, that's
went with
Rob.
Tom.
Oh, I'm sorry. There's a one letter difference between your
letters.
names.
Yeah, one letter. I went
My
with I think Sean Penn,
Yeah, Sean
which
Penn.
was a good herring.
Sean Penn was a good choice. I would have. That was my second choice, Sean Penn, because
Tom Cruise as Edward
was-
Can you
Scissorhands.
imagine?
he's a socialite, you know.
But you know,
Well,
I don't know.
picture him in Legend. Tom Cruise
that's what I was just thinking. Yeah.
as kooky and all the things we associate with the guy. I think we have all said on the show, we acknowledge the dude has chops.
I like
Right.
watching him, even in
Oh,
the
he's
new
fucking
Top Gun movie. So fucking
I
enjoyable,
think,
like I was
yeah.
saying.
He's a gifted guy, and I think that he could have done an Edward Scissorhands. It's just impossible to picture that now.
Well, he just would have been like a goth version, you know, of like just Ed Scissorhands or
I
himself.
would love to see
Well,
it. Wouldn't you love
I
to
mean-
see it? Just the makeup at least.
Well, what's
Well,
awesome about
Because
the
it's
whole
like
Back to the Future
turn of the
thing,
80s. It's the 90s, you know.
Back to the Future thing where Eric Stoltz was the original Marty. We have footage of that. Like we
So
can compare
wild,
it.
yeah.
It
And
would
it's
be
fucking
great to
night and day,
see.
too.
It would be great to see original footage of some of these other artists or actors that didn't quite make the cut. I would love to see a little bit of footage of
I would like
Edward
to see
Scissor
Tom.
Cruise.
I would like to see Tom Cruise hang out with Motley Crue, have him put all the makeup on him, and
Motley
then throw him
Cruise?
into the role.
Totley
Put him in the
Cruz?
role. Motley Crue. And
I
then,
gotta wrap this up, you
it'd
guys.
be
I'm sorry, my
perfect.
kid's calling for me, so let me get through these real fast.
Yeah, we win.
Question 3: Ladybugs. One of these things was true about ladybugs, and it was in fact that they'll often be mating with the female for hours at a time and before they realize something's wrong. Ronster sneaking in there with that point, tying
Almost
him
got me
up
with the
with
brown
Rob.
herring. Burying
Almost.
I guess
themselves
that
in
one as
shit
well.
to get out of chores. This was the one,
That
the
was
one
my
you
choice.
made up.
That was my choice as well.
John Mark. went
Just
with
to be
Necro.
clear, that was my choice as well.
Oh, okay, yes, John Mark got that correct as well, to be clear. Question 4.
Wow.
Many years ago, this notorious musician, who famously would not pose in photographs for much of their career, was asked by their bodyguard, who was writing a book about self-defense, to pose in photos of it. I'll let the photo speak for itself.
I'm gonna laugh at some friends.
It's
I got a
fucking great,
feeling it
too.
might be Prince. Coming over text?
Coming over text, and you'll have to just give Rob the audio version of it here.
Oh.
Well, it is not only Stevie Nicks, it's Stevie Kicks.
She's doing great.
She's
Her
got the
fucking
kicks
awesome.
on.
Her foot, well, the boot, is above her head. Full on, straight ahead.
It's Stevie
kick.
Nicks and Lemmy.
And, yeah.
Oh, yeah,
Why
looks
do you
like
hate Motorhead, Stevie?
Yeah, it totally looks like that.
Just like
Rob
the
got that
one
correct
boot punch.
as well, making him our winner tonight. I think
Just
our guests have been
destroyer.
kicking the shit out of you guys.
Does that mean what I think it means?
I think we're close. Let me look at the Google sheet.
I think we have a full round of listener winners to do. We only need 3.
Yeah, I think we do have 3. We have James Shepard, if I'm not mistaken, and who else? I'm trying to pull it up
Was
frantically.
it Katie? Or who else won? We've had a lot of guests on.
It was Brandon Schultz and James Shepard, and now Rob The Undertaker would make 3.
Okay,
Do we want to go
Rob.
to? Yeah.
So what we need to... do we want it? Do we want 4 players? I think 3. I think 3 because the way we're going to do this is we're gonna interrupt. We're gonna give our opinions.
Maybe you guys should write a question each too.
So I think 3 is enough, right?
All right. Well, let's schedule this. I'll reach out to all 3 of you guys and.
Doesn't have to be next week, but let's do it soon. So Rob, have you been following along the show enough to know what we're talking about here?
Yeah.
So you won.
All right.
You're going to go head to head with the 2 other listener winners. We are not going to play along, but we are going to... I think what we're going to do is our typical analyze, Ronalize, John... There's got to be something in there.
John Markify.
There we go. John Markify. And if... I think that's the way to do it. Instead of going for like the phone a friend thing, I think it would be funner for us. I don't know about the listeners. To weigh in, and then everyone else can base their pick off of that. I'm really looking forward to this.
It's going to be great.
All right, Chris.
Thank you so much for
gotta-
joining us.
you gotta
I'm
get
going
out
to
of here.
bounce out of here, guys.
Go ahead and head on out, Chris. Appreciate all this, and then we can do our little goodbyes here. So, Rob, we will get you back on soon. Probably not next week. We're going to have to coordinate 3 listeners on top of all 4 of us being able to get together. But we will figure it out, and we will have you all on for one mega... I hope we can get that many people on Skype without it sketching out. I think we probably can.
We pause it out. People that don't need to talk don't need to talk, and just mute.
It should be fine. But I'm excited about that. Well, good job, Rob. I'm happy that you won.
Yeah, thanks.
I'm always happy when the guests win, even if it means me losing. But I appreciate you joining us. You've always been one of our favorite guests. I would love to have you on more frequently. I think that there are any number of these subgenres of your industry that could make entire 2-hour podcasts, honestly, if we got into it in depth, just talking about one aspect of it. We go all over the map in general on the show, but I appreciate you always being game for wherever we take it and wherever our kooky audience takes it. And if I die before you do, I hope that you are handling my naked corpse, because I truly believe that you are a professional. You truly enjoy what you do. You respect what you do. And as I said earlier, there's nothing more personal than our own persons. And this is a very intimate relationship that you have with mostly strangers. I know at some point you have to come across people that you know, right? Or do you?
Oh yeah. No, I've had. That's one of the reasons why I moved out of Wenatchee, to be honest with you.
So you got away from that. Yeah.
Well, I got partly away. Yeah.
Yeah.
I still,
But
no
you
matter
still
where
do
I
it.
go, I end up seeing people
Well, sure.
I know. So.
You're still going to meet people. You're still going to make new
Yeah.
friends, coworkers,
Yeah.
and associates. It's a very special industry. It's a misunderstood industry, as we talked last time. I think it's misunderstood in maybe some of the knee-jerk reactions to it. Where it's like, oh, only weirdos and ghouls would get into that industry. you happened into it, and even if somebody is just kind of curious about working with the dead, curious about the process, I don't find anything wrong with that as long as it's coming from a genuine place and not a weird and creepy place. You know, you just this is a needed industry. It's a needed position, and it's something that we're going to need forever. And I appreciate that you are out there doing it. I think you're a good one, and I appreciate you coming to the show and again putting up with our shit.
Yeah,
Thanks,
thank
Rob.
you for that. I appreciate you guys
Yeah,
letting
thanks,
me
Rob.
come on. Next time we can talk about composting and water cremation. That'll really
See, that's the
bring
thing.
in the
There's
questions.
so much that we could get into. Yeah.
Well, that was that.
Yeah.
There was a weird bulb thing too, like make you a tree, like you stick you into a tree and it just basically breaks you down and
Mhm.
thrives.
Yeah,
That's a
that-
weird.
Is that a thing in
Yes.
Washington yet, Rob?
that's an art installation in Europe. It doesn't even exist.
That's not a
Oh.
real thing yet.
No, the tree pod thing.
Oh yeah,
it-
yeah. That's what it's
Yeah.
called.
Yeah, think about it it sounds like a cool idea, but think about it just for a second. If you're driving down the road and you see some guy with the back of the truck, he's got this big pod with a tree growing out of it. What are you going to think?
Right.
Who's he got?
Well,
No, it's actually not something that it's not something that's actually out there. It was actually created as an art piece that got mislabeled and put out as something that was going on in Europe.
No
and,
shit.
Oh wow. The more you
Yeah.
know.
The
Yeah.
more
so,
you know.
So you
Yeah,
must have
there you
people
go.
asking you about that kind of thing all the time.
We get that question. Get a lot of questions about the mushroom suit. You know that Luke Perry. Remember here, Luke Perry?
That's right.
They buried him in the mushroom suit. What I understand about it is that's not working. So I don't. I don't think there's any mushrooms that have been produced from it.
No
yet,
one's getting
so.
any Luke Perry mushrooms, huh?
So there's a lot of stuff out there, and yeah, just like I say, do your research. The best advice I can give to the listeners, and I'll tell you this every time, is think about what you want, write it down, and let people know. Because if you think about it, 50% of the people in the cemeteries are under the age of 50, which means that they die young and usually unexpected. And so you want people to know exactly what it is that you want to have done. So plan it out, write it down, and make sure people know what it is.
Yeah. Good advice. Well, you've given us a lot of thought. The donor thing is very interesting too. So I appreciate you joining us, Rob, and we will have you back on soon. And if you ever want any kooky guests on your show, well, you know where to find us.
Hey, we can do it.
I
It'll be a lot
understand.
of
Now
fun.
listen, we can clean it up. But we can't not be ourselves. So I
I
won't
got
be
you.
offended
I
if
got
you don't reach out. I know we have different audiences, and you're going for a whole different vibe, and going back to the professionalism thing. But these are things that a lot of people think about. It's
Sure.
one of the most kooky industries, and we're all heading there. And no matter who you are in life, we all end up on a slab, naked in front of people handling us and processing us and taking care of our wishes. And it's good to
Hopefully
know
not
that
making
they're...
notes of your weird tattoos.
I think it's fair. I mean, you're still human beings. This is what I like, though. You're human beings. And this is what I'm saying. This is one of the many reasons why this is a forever industry. I don't think any of us are going to be happy even when robots really get dialed in. Do we want to be handled by robots in the afterlife, or do we want to be handled by human beings who, understand what a living being actually represents? You clearly do, and I don't know. It makes me feel good that there are people like you that truly respect what you do and understand the gravity of it. So I appreciate you.
Appreciate that.
On the way out, I'd like to kind of offer a little thought.
Take us out.
You know how Sasquatch, he's a raging machine out in the woods doing his thing.
Absolutely.
What if he's actually related to the ladybug? Think about that.
How so?
That he just does his business and he just never stops until the thing's dead. And they're like, oh God.
Well,
What about
listen, here's the interesting thing about that question. Necrophilia in the animal kingdom is incredibly condom. I said condom.
You did say condom.
I meant common. I'm so drunk. I got drunk before the show because it's the Halloween. Well, I said take us out, Lyle, but I think Ron's going to take us out with
Ron,
necrophilia. In the animal kingdom is incredibly condom. I'm so sad Christopher wasn't here to hear that. I hope he listens back to it.
At least you're safe. Safe about it.
All right. Take care of yourselves and each other. Good night, everybody, and have a very happy and mostly safe Halloween. Night, y'all.
Spooky, spooky.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.